Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Courtney Holden. Courtney Holden was born on February 28, 1992. When she was 2 years old, she was sent to an orphanage. Life there was not happy, not only for Courtney but for all the other children. Every day at the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of all ages prayed to the Almighty to give them a family and a happy life. Finally, Courtney's dream came true when she was adopted by the Holden family. Courtney arrived in Spokane at the age of 4 and began living in the Holden family home with Joshua and some other foster children. However, instead of finding a loving family as she had hoped, her life here was worse than at the orphanage. What Courtney experienced at the Holden home could only be described as a real nightmare. From a young age, she was forced to do all the housework. She had to clean the whole house and wash the dishes after every meal for the entire family. If she made a mistake, she was punished. Surprisingly, the Holden family treated the other foster children better. No one understood why they disliked her so much. Judy Holden was old when she adopted Courtney, and she was the last child they had received from the orphanage. Perhaps this explains their inexplicable cruelty and hatred towards Courtney. She was forbidden to go out without permission and was often abused. Visitors to the house often heard Judy and Joshua calling Courtney Cinderella, as if she were in a fairy tale, but in reality, she was more like a slave to her cruel stepmother and siblings. Courtney was very sensitive and had become accustomed to a difficult life with the Holden family. She feared her foster mother and felt terrified just seeing her brother Joshua. He did not allow her to communicate with her friends. She was not allowed to use a cell phone or other modern devices. She was only allowed to leave the house when necessary and always had to ask for permission. She only enjoyed fresh air and chatted with her neighbors when she was alone in the backyard. However, she became accustomed to this life and did not feel bitter. She still respected her adoptive parents because they were the only family she knew, and she had no concept of a normal family. Courtney experienced a period of freedom when Joshua, due to conflicts with their parents, moved in with his sister for an extended time. For Courtney, this was the happiest period of her life. She finally experienced the freedom she had always longed for, allowing her to go out, walk around, and meet friends. After finishing school, Courtney fell in love for the first time. Michael was an ideal partner. She felt the care and attention from him that she had never received from anyone else. Every time she met Michael, Courtney felt extremely happy. Their relationship lasted until 2011, when they had a son. Michael was eager for Courtney to move in with him to create a complete family. However, for unknown reasons, Courtney refused this offer. She continued to live in a Holden household, which she did not like, and ended her relationship with Michael. After the Holden family went through many changes, their home became deserted. The adopted children grew up and left, and John Holden, Courtney's adoptive father, was passed away. For a while, Courtney lived with her adoptive mother, Judy, and sometimes her son Joshua was allowed to visit with Judy's permission. Their life was quite peaceful when Joshua, Courtney's brother, was away. However, after their father died in 2014, Joshua returned and began causing trouble for the family. He installed many surveillance cameras around the house on Hero Avenue, near Rogers High School in Northeast Spokane. Signs that said, "Smile, you're being watched," were placed all over the yard, with cameras pointing in many directions. This made Courtney nervous because she knew that going out would get her in trouble with Joshua. Courtney's life once again became difficult and uncertain. Around 2015, Courtney revealed to a neighbor that she was again deprived of her right to use a cell phone, manage her social media accounts, communicate with people outside the family, drive, or leave the house without Joshua's permission. After Courtney gave birth, Joshua became so bitter that he forced her to cut off all contact with the baby's father. Courtney silently complied. The neighbor noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms. When asked, she frankly admitted that Joshua hit her. They were worried and did not understand why Courtney would endure such abuse. They tried to help her by reporting it to the police, but the Holden family always tried to suppress the matter. This was partly because Courtney never publicly admitted that she was being threatened by her brother. Eventually, Courtney was forbidden to talk to neighbors and was only allowed to go out at night. She silently complied. Courtney knew Joshua better than anyone. He was a large, overweight man with considerable strength and was often abusive. Friends of Joshua described him as paranoid, ruthless, and unpredictable. He had bragged in public about his ability to easily end a life and dispose of a body without difficulty. He had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but due to lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police, he was released. He was also suspected of assaulting and sexually abusing a woman in 2003 when the perpetrator could not be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and burglary. These incidents forced him to flee his parents' home for several years. After returning, Joshua became more violent. He kept complete control over Courtney. She largely cut off contact with her friends, saying she was afraid to go out for fear that Joshua would find out and make things worse. A friend kept in touch with Courtney every day on Facebook until Joshua found out. In her last message, nearly 2 years ago, Courtney said, "I have to go. Joshua is coming home soon." After that, her account has since been permanently deleted. Those who know the Holdens say the family's relationship is unusual. They are surprised that Courtney's child calls Judy mom and Joshua dad, while only calling his biological mother by her first name. This has led some to suspect that Joshua may be the child's biological father. Neighbors and acquaintances have criticized the Holdens' odd lifestyle and antisocial behavior, and have tried to stay away from the house. In August 2018, after an argument, Courtney tried to leave the house with a suitcase of belongings. Her mother, Judy, yelled at her to go home, but Courtney refused. Joshua forcibly took Courtney back into the house. Judy closed the door, and Courtney was unable to escape. This was the last time the neighbors, and perhaps anyone outside the family, saw Courtney. After that, she lived a life of isolation from the outside world. It took nearly 2 years for people to start worrying about her disappearance. In October 2019, Michael expressed concern about not seeing her for nearly 2 years. He wanted to see the child, so he reported Courtney missing to the police on October 24th. The police went to search Holden's house and were surprised to find Courtney was not there. Joshua and Judy refused to cooperate. Judy only allowed the police to look through Courtney's room and then told them to leave. A search dog was used but found nothing. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and run away. However, they could not explain who was withdrawing Courtney's Social Security benefits and using her electronic food stamps. On the day the police searched the house, Judy and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Crime Information Center, saying she was safe and did not want to be searched. Police traced the call and found that the woman was Courtney's half-sister. Joshua and Judy later gave conflicting explanations for Courtney's disappearance. They said she ran away with a truck driver and then with a secret lover. Courtney's absence, along with the changing accounts of those who lived with her, made it clear that the Holdens were hiding something. In late October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden abruptly left Spokane, leading detectives to suspect they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. They were found in Texas, at the home of one of Judy's adopted daughters. Authorities were able to charge them with withholding Courtney's welfare and identity theft, leading to their arrest in Texas. In early October, the Spokane Police Department wanted to check on Courtney's status. The case quickly became a missing persons investigation, which was assigned to major crimes detective Randy Lesser. Courtney was officially declared missing. Alerts were sent to all states, and the media picked up the story, triggering a widespread search. When police and detectives went to check on her home, Joshua and Judy Holden have continued to refuse to cooperate with the investigation. Beside that, Randy told the vet he was worried Courtney might be dead and mentioned he was particularly concerned about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dismissed when the victim stopped cooperating with prosecutors. Investigators are now gathering DNA evidence and court records from that case, which show Joshua was also suspected in another attack in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as mentally unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. One neighbor revealed that Joshua was unemployed and that Judy feared him. The neighbor said Joshua and Judy often bragged about how they had eluded the police. Joshua also claimed that killing and hiding a body was easy. "Especially when you have kids, you can't just disappear," said Detective Randy. Courtney was also described in court records as a devoted mother who never abandoned her children. For more than 18 months, Courtney was confined to her home and was not allowed to leave. Joshua and Judy gave neighbors and relatives various excuses for her absence, from traveling with her truck driver boyfriend to running away with her fiancé. At one point, they said she was home but not available to receive visitors. When Randy visited their home in early October, Judy claimed that Courtney had just returned home a few days earlier and was taking a walk with her son. However, when asked for her phone number, Judy slammed the door. The police then forced her to let them in to check Courtney's room. According to Randy, Judy appeared very nervous about the situation. According to Randy's court records, the house was extremely messy with items piled everywhere, including on the kitchen counter. Courtney's room was also in disarray, with an empty mattress. Randy commented that it appeared that no one lived there. At one point, Judy panicked. When Randy asked to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Judy ordered the investigators to leave. Later that day, a neighbor informed Randy that they had seen Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leave in a truck, along with a child. Detective Randy also became suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. She received her last prescription in July 2017, although she had been taking her medication for months before she disappeared. Despite gaps in her medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account each month, and her EBT card was used to purchase groceries. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. They was also caught on camera withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. On October 24th, Joshua and Judy left the home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, Randy noted that they discovered the DVR from the security camera system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were also missing. By mid-November, Joshua and Judy's cell phone numbers had been canceled. However, that same day, 2 new phone numbers with Texas area codes were activated on their accounts. About a month after the Holdens moved out, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was actually one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They said they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Judy was retired. However, there were inconsistencies in their information. The man told the police that Joshua and Judy had a child, while Judy's daughter insisted that the child was Courtney's. In mid-December, Randy traveled to Texas to look for Joshua and Judy. Police found them at Judy's daughter's house, along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested on multiple charges: identity theft, interference with child custody, unauthorized use of Courtney's bank account, and concealment of her child. The child was found safe and returned to his father. No other family members have been charged with any crime. Police searched Judy's home in Spokane with a search dog but found no trace of Courtney. A search of a home in Texas also turned up nothing. Police also searched a car and trailer belonging to Judy at an RV park in Oklahoma. Joshua, 40, and Judy, 74, are currently in custody in Texas and have refused to answer police questions. They also refuse to be extradited to Spokane. With insufficient evidence to prove their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, it is likely that Joshua and Judy will be released. This is perhaps one of the most mysterious disappearances ever. "I have 4 notebooks full of different information," Randy said of the month-long investigation. Judy and Joshua continue to maintain that they had nothing to do with Courtney's disappearance, while police believe she is likely dead but have unfortunately not been able to prove it. Domestic violence experts point to a number of factors as to why cases like Courtney's are not always reported. One is the societal assumption that someone else will take care of it. According to Morgan Kern, Director of Counseling and Outreach at the YWCA, fear of retaliation can also be a factor. And people sometimes view it as a family issue, something to be dealt with at home. Although Judy and Joshua have been accused of multiple acts, they have not been charged directly in Courtney's disappearance. However, many still suspect they knew what happened. Joshua not only had a history of aggression but had also claimed to be capable of killing and hiding a body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is dead, but no suspects have been arrested in the case. To summarize today's story, it is sad that Courtney was victimized by the Holden family. This young woman longed for a loving family but did not have the courage to defend herself. She believed that the people who abused and exploited her were still family. But does a real family need to make you defend yourself like that? Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Her family and early life are not well documented. She spent her childhood in an area called Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samadi attended a local school, where she demonstrated a challenging and conflicted personality from an early age. She had difficulty accepting rejection and often used force or deception to get what she wanted. People who knew her recall that Samadi's striking appearance and perfect figure made it easy for her to charm men, but she struggled to maintain relationships. Her beauty and charisma were matched by her greed and vanity, which led her to prioritize material wealth and self-interest above all else. This attitude often discouraged potential partners. Additionally, Samadi became intensely jealous and aggressive after brief relationships. Samadi's doll-like appearance led to her working as a Barbie lookalike at a large Universal bookstore for several years. This earned her a flattering nickname that stuck with her throughout her life. After high school, Samadi had in love with a successful local TV journalist named Osvaldo Fernando Ballery, who was 16 years her senior. Samadi had a long and serious relationship with Osvaldo, with whom she had 2 children, Christopher and Christina. However, due to constant scandals and jealousy, they separated in 2012. After Osvaldo's sudden death, it was discovered that he had not included Samadi in his will. Samadi took matters into her own hands and seized Osvaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent his relatives and heirs from entering. She also took some valuable items that belonged to Osvaldo. His family members were outraged and went to court to accuse Samadi of theft. The police eventually forced Samadi to leave the house, but she was not charged with a crime. Samadi had other relationships, including one with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a daughter named Maria. This relationship was reportedly official, but ended in divorce after a few years. Samadi allegedly gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his knowledge or consent, contradicting claims that she was unmarried at the time. Interestingly, some of her lovers have mysteriously disappeared or died under unclear circumstances, yet this trend went unnoticed for a long time. For instance, one of Samadi's lovers went missing shortly after deciding to end their relationship with the reportedly temperamental and aggressive woman. Despite relative suspicions of her involvement, his disappearance remains unsolved due to lack of concrete evidence. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samadi. His murder was initially attributed to a botched robbery, but the perpetrators were never caught. Speculations about Samadi's role in the crime persisted, albeit without solid proof. Her most notable alleged victim was Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native born in December 1992 in San Jose. Gerardo never knew his biological father, who left the family before his birth. His mother, Ana Patricia, later married Hermes Rodriguez, who adopted and raised Gerardo as his own. Gerardo's younger sister, Milena, was born a few years after him. He had a peaceful and carefree childhood and youth. Gerardo attended a regular school, enjoyed motorcycles, and met his true love, Carol, at a young age. By 23, he, Carol, and their 4-year-old daughter Genesis moved into his aunt and uncle's house in San Sebastian, a suburb of the city. Gerardo took a job at a local bakery to support his family. They were happy, especially with the news of a second child on the way. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a 40-year-old woman who regularly visited the bakery. She was attractive, fashionably dressed, and flirtatious. As Samadi aged, she began to have relationships with younger men, likely flattered by their attention. Despite their nearly 20-year age difference, Gerardo became infatuated with Samadi and started secretly meeting with her. She visited the bakery almost daily, catching the attention of other employees. Samadi often brought her 19-year-old daughter, Christina, to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo balanced his family life and secret meetings with Samadi without either woman knowing about the other. However, Gerardo soon let his guard down, boasting to friends and colleagues about his relationship with Samadi, describing her as a terrific mistress who spoiled him with gifts. Rumors about Gerardo's affair soon reached his mother, who attempted to persuade him to end the relationship. The affair was short-lived, ending in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that his mistress, Gerardo, was married with a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Upon learning this, Samadi became enraged. She began harassing Carol, Gerardo's wife, with threatening calls and messages, warning her that Gerardo would be harmed if he didn't return to her exclusively. Gerardo apologized to his wife and reconciled, keeping their family intact. He underestimated Samadi's malice, thinking she would move on and calm down after the breakup. However, Samadi's vindictiveness was more intense than Gerardo anticipated. Shortly after the breakup, Gerardo witnessed a disturbing incident. While walking downtown, Gerardo noticed an older man secretly filming under a young girl's mini-skirt with his phone. Outraged, Gerardo took out his phone to record the scene. He then approached she, told her what was happening, and advised her to report the incident to the police. Gerardo chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to get a clear shot of his face on camera. During the chase, Gerardo asked loudly if the man was enjoying taking photos of his sister's underwear without their consent. The man eventually jumped into a taxi and escaped. That night, Gerardo posted the video on his social media page, and it quickly went viral. Internet users identified the man as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former Ministry of Finance employee. As a result, Gerardo became a national celebrity, giving daily interviews to newspapers and appearing on TV and radio shows. He condemned Delgado's actions and stated that he had no regrets about exposing him. However, Delgado's lawyers began working against Gerardo, accusing him of violating the law by distributing the video. They prepared a lawsuit against him, which left Gerardo surprised and confused. He couldn't understand why he was being judged for exposing his actions, rather than the man being held accountable for his behavior. Gerardo's last interview was on October 7th at a local radio station. Feeling confident and believing he had nothing to hide, he spoke openly. The following day, Gerardo had plans to meet his friend Oswald after work, but he suddenly canceled, citing an unexpected emergency. It was later revealed that he had received a message from Samadi, luring him to the park that evening under the pretext of another interview. Gerardo had no reason to suspect anything was amiss and trusted his former lover. After finishing work, he went to the agreed meeting point, but instead of journalists, two unknown men were waiting. They took his bag, assaulted him, stabbed him multiple times in the chest and stomach, and then fled. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo managed to call a friend and report the incident. The friend immediately alerted the police and medical services. Thanks to the swift response, Gerardo was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. He underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unable to save him. Gerardo passed away on November 19th in the intensive care unit. Initially, multiple theories emerged about the crime. The first theory suggested it was a robbery murder. Gerardo was indeed attacked in a park at night, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife, which made it appear to be a typical theft. However, just a few days before, Gerardo had released a sensational video that compromised a well-known former government official, leading to a second theory, that the murder was an act of revenge. The media openly speculated that the former government official may have hired hitmen to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The murder sparked intense debate in the press, with protesters demanding that the perpetrators be caught and brought to justice. The police explored various theories, searching for other potential enemies of Gerardo. For months, the investigation stalled. However, in May 2016, a breakthrough came when footage from a street surveillance camera was discovered. The video showed two men fleeing the scene where Gerardo was fatally attacked. These individuals immediately became the prime suspects, and the police worked to identify and apprehend them. The footage proved to be crucial evidence, and once it was made public, the case started to move forward. It was repeatedly shown on news programs, with viewers asked to take a close look as the individuals could be dangerous. Police created rough sketches of the suspects and described their physical characteristics. One of the suspects soon came forward, hoping that cooperating with the investigation would lead to a reduced sentence. The information provided by the cooperating suspect led investigators to several accomplices and the crime's organizers, Samadi and her daughter Christina. All individuals involved in the crime were eventually taken into custody. Those arrested included Ronald Archie, a cab driver who helped locate the perpetrators, Cesar Chavez, a laborer who acted as an intermediary, and Omar Costa, a young miner who directly participated in the attack and had been tracking the victim on the day of the incident. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all parties involved through phone records and text messages. Samadi, who had meticulously planned the crime, had enlisted the help of her daughter Christina. Together, they recruited friends Ronald and Cesar to find hitmen to kill Gerardo, staging it to look like a botched robbery in a nighttime park. They were later joined by Omar, who was responsible for ensuring the victim went to the pre-arranged location. Samadi personally chose October 7th as the date for the massacre. On that day, she was in frequent contact with all parties involved, assigning roles and verifying that everyone adhered to the plan. Gerardo was attacked, stabbed multiple times, and robbed of his bag and jacket. These stolen items were later given to the police as evidence. The primary evidence against Samadi was a series of text messages detailing the murder plan and each participant's role. Samadi was so confident she wouldn't get caught that she didn't bother deleting the incriminating messages. Her motive for the crime was jealousy. She didn't want to share her lover with his wife. If she couldn't have him, no one would. She carefully planned the crime, involving her own daughter, who assisted her throughout. Samadi and her daughter were immediately arrested, with no possibility of bail due to the risk of them fleeing the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar, the youngest participant, who was handed over to juvenile authorities. The investigation spanned a year and a half, concluding in December 2017 when the trial of all parties involved in the criminal conspiracy commenced. It was revealed that Samadi had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior arrest for forging documents to obtain state benefits, for which she received only a fine. New information also emerged about Miguel Angel Perez, ex-husband of Samadi. It was discovered that Samadi had given their child Perez's surname without his consent. She then successfully petitioned the court to order him to pay child support, which he did for over 3 years. However, it was later uncovered that the entire process had been fraudulent. As a result, Samadi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a substantial fine. During the trial, Gerardo's wife testified that she had been aware of his affair with Samadi. She stated that Samadi had threatened Gerardo with death, but he had not taken these threats seriously. The primary motive behind the crime, as previously stated, was Samadi's jealousy and wounded pride, stemming from her inability to accept that her younger lover had chosen to remain with his wife. Thanks to phone records, it was discovered that the mother and daughter had planned the crime together. Additionally, after the release of the CCTV footage showing the killers, Christine had a nervous breakdown. She called her mother, sobbing, and was close to going to the police to confess. However, her mother calmed her down, assuring her that the investigation would not lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. According to the court's decision, Samadi was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while Christina, Ronald, and Caesar each received 25-year prison sentences. One of the killers was sent to a juvenile detention center, and the other had not been found at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family was awarded $140,000 in compensation for their loss. After the verdict, the family expressed gratitude to the court for the fair punishment of Gerardo's killers. However, it soon became known that Samadi and Christina's lawyers had filed an appeal to reduce their sentences. As a result, each participant's sentence was reduced by 5 years. Samadi is currently serving her 25-year sentence in a Costa Rican women's prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Natalie Holloway. Natalie Holloway was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth and David Edward Holloway. Her parents had a loving relationship that began in their youth, but after 13 years of marriage, they divorced due to the stresses of domestic life. Following the divorce, Natalie and her brother Matthew lived with their mother, who continued to receive emotional and financial support from their father. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, a businessman from Alabama, and the family moved to Mountain Brook. The transition was seamless, and Natalie and her brother remained close to their father, visiting him regularly during holidays. Natalie's upbringing was deeply influenced by her family's strong Christian values, which emphasized kindness, modesty, and community involvement. As a result, she developed into a compassionate and humble individual who prioritized her studies and extracurricular activities over social events. Despite her popularity, Natalie chose not to attend parties or go on dates, instead focusing on her goals and aspirations. She was an excellent student, a skilled dancer, and an active member of various clubs, with ambitions to pursue a career in medicine and secure a scholarship to a local university. On May 26, 2005, Natalie joined 123 other students and 7 chaperones on a trip to a beautiful Aruba island. The group of 18-year-olds stayed at the Holiday Inn and spent their time relaxing on the beach, swimming, and enjoying the local restaurants and entertainment. They made the most of their trip, dancing into the early hours of the morning. On the night of May 29th to 30th, Natalie was initially acting normally and socializing while sober. However, after consuming a drink given to her by Joran, her behavior changed, indicating that she may have been under the influence of a substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie's bar had a positive opinion of Natalie, but viewed Joran unfavorably due to his history of poor behavior, gambling, and substance abuse. Joran had a reputation for renting hotel rooms with friends, where they would invite foreign women and secretly record their activities, later uploading the videos online. Natalie Holloway's disappearance began with a frantic phone call from her mother, Elizabeth Twitty. After failing to reach her daughter, Elizabeth contacted one of the trip's chaperones to report her concerns. Elizabeth's instincts told her something was wrong, as Natalie was a responsible and punctual person who always stayed in touch. When Natalie didn't return to the airport with the rest of the group on May 30th, Elizabeth's worst fears were confirmed. Her belongings, including her phone and passport, were still at the hotel, but Natalie was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth and her husband quickly flew to Aruba to search for their missing daughter. When Elizabeth arrived in Aruba, she discovered more about Natalie's disappearance than the police had. Unfortunately, the authorities didn't seem to be in a hurry to investigate and initially disregarded Elizabeth's concerns. This type of case isn't unusual in Aruba, and the police appeared to be taking it lightly. They implied that it was common for tourists to miss their flights or lose track of their group, and that Natalie was probably just having fun, drinking, or socializing with new people. Natalie's last known whereabouts were on May 30th at around 1:30 a.m., when she left a bar with a man named Van der Sloot. They got into a car with 2 other young men, and that's the last time she was seen. Natalie and her friends had been spending time at the notorious Carlos and Charlie's nightclub and casino. On one of those nights, she met a 17-year-old local named Joran, who offered to buy her a drink. He then invited her to visit a lighthouse and see sharks in the area. As they left the club, a silver Honda car driven by the Deepak Kalpoe brothers was waiting for them. Elizabeth contacted the police for a second time 4 hours later, and this time she shared some concerning information. As a result, the 3 individuals were detained. Van der Sloot initially claimed he didn't know Natalie, but eventually admitted he had left the bar with her. According to him, they spent some time driving around, stopped by the beach, and later dropped Natalie off near her hotel. Deepak Kalpoe brothers, 18, and the 21-year-old, confirmed Van der Sloot's story. It's worth noting that the 3 were questioned together by the police, an approach that seems questionable from a law enforcement perspective. Later on, they altered their statements multiple times. Despite his questionable behavior, Joran was never held accountable for his actions. None of the charges against him went to court. It was later discovered that Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was a well-known lawyer who was seeking a judgeship. Apparently, corruption was prevalent in Aruba, allowing individuals like Joran to avoid accountability for their actions. As the investigation continued, David Holloway, Natalie's father, arrived in Aruba and joined the search efforts, which were led by his ex-wife and journalists. As public pressure mounted, it was discovered that the hotel's surveillance cameras did not capture the suspect's car, and there was no footage of Natalie entering the building on May 30th. This revelation contradicted the statements of Joran and the Kalpoe brothers, who were subsequently called in for questioning again. During this second round of questioning, one of the Kalpoe brothers unexpectedly changed his story, claiming that he had dropped Natalie off at a location before reaching the hotel, which was not covered by surveillance cameras. He also added that he had seen a figure in black approaching Natalie, who was later revealed to be one of the hotel's security guards. On June 5, investigators took into custody the hotel security staff who were working the night Natalie disappeared. 4 days later, on June 9, detectives arrested 3 people, including 2 of the Kalpoe brothers, due to suspicious circumstances. While in jail, one of the security guards learned something important from the Kalpoe brothers. Satish admitted that he and his brother Deepak had lied to protect their friend Joran. In reality, they had left Joran alone with Natalie on the beach and had gone their separate ways. The security guards were released on June 13. A few days later, on June 17, police detained Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ who had worked on yacht parties, because they suspected he might be involved in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22, Paulus van der Sloot, Joran's father, was questioned and detained by police, but he was released on June 26 along with Steve Cruz because there was not enough evidence. Joran later changed his story again, this time blaming the Kalpoe brothers for Natalie's disappearance. He claimed that he had said goodbye to Natalie near his home and that she had left with the brothers. However, his new story was not believable. The Kalpoe brothers' lawyer responded to Joran's accusations. After a short trial on July 4, the Kalpoe brothers were released from custody. At the same time, Joran's time in custody was extended by 2 more months. Despite the growing evidence, the police seemed to be ignoring Joran's possible involvement in Natalie's disappearance. Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, to Paulus van der Sloot, a lawyer, and Anita van der Sloot-Hugen, an art teacher. He was one of 3 brothers in a large family that moved to Aruba in 1990. Joran grew up on the island, where he attended the International School of Aruba and excelled academically. He also developed a passion for sports, particularly soccer and tennis, and showed promise in these areas. Joran's family life was complicated. As a child, he was closer to his father, but his relationship with his mother was strained. Anita considered Joran dishonest and struggled to instill good values in him. She remembered him as a rebellious child who frequently ran away from home. As Joran entered adulthood, he began to associate with a questionable crowd and developed a taste for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as confident and fearless to his friends, which initially impressed many people. However, locals were wary of Joran, sensing that his permissive behavior would eventually lead to trouble. Joran was popular with girls, but he often took advantage of them. Overall, people had mixed opinions about Joran, with some being drawn to his charismatic personality and others being put off by his questionable behavior. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalie Holloway remained ongoing. U.S. authorities assisted by closely monitoring the progress and providing significant financial support to aid in the search for the Natalie. Although the Aruban authorities were not pleased with the increased scrutiny, they accepted the funding. On August 26, the police detained the Kalpoe brothers and another young man, but this was unrelated to the case. The arrest was an attempt to intimidate them into talking. All 4 were released on bail on September 3, 2005, and a week and a half later, all restrictions were lifted. Joran van der Sloot spent about 3 months in custody. After his release, he reveled in the notoriety, giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. He claimed Natalie Holloway was flirtatious and offered intimacy, but he declined due to lack of contraception. When questioned about his credibility, Joran threw a glass at the interviewer, showcasing his impulsiveness and aggression. According to the recorder, Joran van der Sloot was confessing to witnessing Natalie Holloway's death on the beach in Aruba. He claimed they were intimate before she lost consciousness, and despite trying CPR, she died. Van der Sloot said he and a friend disposed of her body at sea. Despite the damning recording, van der Sloot again avoided consequences, quickly denying his statement after it aired. In his 2007 book, The Case of Natalie Holloway, My Own Account, van der Sloot maintained his innocence, apologizing to Natalie's family and providing his account of events, despite ceasing search efforts by authorities. In 2008, 2 new witnesses came forward in the case. One reported seeing Joran and his father on the beach near the Holiday Inn on May 30, 2005, around 4 a.m. Joran appeared disheveled and shirtless. The witness saw them arguing in a car before driving away. However, Paulus had an alibi for the night of Natalie's disappearance. Joran's former girlfriend also came forward, recalling a comment he made about easily disposing of a body. However, Joran was known for lying and exaggerating. Despite these developments, Joran and the Kalpoe brothers were detained and released multiple times. The Holloway family hired a private investigator, Tim Miller, who searched the landfill and discovered oversights by the island's police, including failure to interview Natalie's classmates or hotel room neighbors. Natalie's electronic room key was used several times on the night of her disappearance, and she left behind her rare and expensive mobile phone. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation's flaws were exposed. After his father's death, Joran contacted the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth about Natalie's disappearance for a $250,000 reward. He claimed he wanted to clear his conscience, but was actually blackmailing them. The Holloways, desperate for answers, paid Joran $25,000 to meet with their lawyer, John Kelly, in Aruba. Joran provided a new account of events, claiming Natalie resisted his sexual assault, struggled, and hit her head on a rock after he pushed her. He then buried her body in a building foundation. Elizabeth Twitty followed up on Joran's claims by contacting the police. However, verifying his story was simple, and it quickly became apparent that the house he pointed to had been built long before Natalie's disappearance. As a result, the police concluded that his testimony was insufficient to warrant an arrest. It was widely believed that Joran had fabricated another lie to obtain money, and after receiving the funds, he fled to Peru. In another case, on June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Tatiana Flores Ramirez was found in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had suffered severe injuries and died from a neck fracture. The case drew significant media attention due to the victim's father being a well-known businessman and former Formula One driver. Surveillance footage quickly identified the perpetrator. Surprisingly, the perpetrator was Joran van der Sloot. He was arrested and taken into custody. He claimed to have met Stephanie at the Atlantic City Casino on May 30th, where they played poker together. They then decided to continue their time in his hotel room, where they gambled at an online casino. Stephanie discovered disturbing information on Joran's laptop while he was in the bathroom. She learned that he was a suspect in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway, which frightened her and made her want to leave. However, Joran caught her and became enraged when he realized what she had found. He physically attacked her until he was certain she was dead. After the attack, Joran showered and left the scene, instructing the staff not to disturb Stephanie, falsely claiming she was sleeping. Her body was found 3 days later, on June 3rd. Joran was caught on June 4th while trying to flee to Chile and subsequently confessed to the crime. The news of the murder shocked the U.S., especially given that it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalie Holloway's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty, Natalie's mother, was moved by the news, saying that justice had finally been served, but at a terrible cost. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot was sentenced to 28 years in prison for Stephanie's murder and ordered to pay the Ramirez family $75,000 in compensation. Joran was first imprisoned at Pedras Gordas, but was later moved to Chalip Pala in 2014. During his incarceration, he married a Peruvian woman he met in 2010 while she was visiting another inmate. She believed that Joran had genuinely changed and become a better person, describing him as attentive and gentle during their time together. However, this proved to be a facade, as Joran was actually using her for his own benefit and showed no remorse for his past actions. Meanwhile, Natalie Holloway's family was seeking closure. In June 2011, her father, David Holloway, filed a petition in an Alabama court to have Natalie declared legally deceased. Natalie's mother opposed this move, holding on to the hope that Joran would eventually confess to the crime and face trial. After 2 hearings, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration, stating that all necessary requirements had been met. On January 12, 2012, the court officially declared Natalie deceased. On June 8, 2023, Van der Sloot was extradited to the United States and taken to the Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he denied all charges. However, on October 18, 2023, he changed his plea and admitted to murdering Natalie Holloway. He confessed to killing her on May 30, 2005, by hitting her with a cinder block after she rejected his advances, and then disposing of her body in the ocean where it was likely consumed by sharks. Although Van der Sloot confessed to the crime as part of a plea deal, this confession cannot be used as evidence in court. As a result, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which will be served at the same time as his existing prison term in Peru. Despite the confession, Natalie Holloway's disappearance remains an open case in Aruba, and her murder has gone unpunished due to a series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays, despite widespread international attention to the investigation. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Josephson. Samantha Josephson was born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. She majored in political science at the University of South Carolina. She plans to attend Drexel University School of Law with the goal of specializing in international law. Samantha received a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers University, and hopes to pursue a career in international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority and had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona. While in South Carolina, she also visited Madrid and Paris. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg. Samantha and Greg communicated regularly through text messages and phone calls every day whenever possible. Even though Samantha was about to enter law school, they still planned to build a future together. Greg planned to move in with her and support her. However, everything changed on Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha did not return to her apartment. On March 28, 2019, Samantha decided to hang out with her roommate and friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend, Greg, was unable to come along, the group visited several bars before ending up at the Bird Dog Bar in 5 Points, a popular place for students to socialize. Samantha was hanging out with friends, but she kept texting her boyfriend, Greg. She wanted him to drive to Columbia to be with her. However, they had plans to meet up the following weekend, so Greg decided not to go to Columbia with her. He kept in regular contact with Samantha. Around 2 a.m., Samantha left and returned to her apartment alone. She called an Uber to get home. Samantha was waiting for an Uber. While waiting, she talked to Greg on the phone at around 2:04 a.m. and told him she was on her way home. She had used Uber many times before to get to and from bars. Shortly after requesting a ride, a car pulled up at the curb where Samantha walked up to the car, realized it wasn't hers, and then turned around to return to her spot on the sidewalk. She was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up in front of Samantha. She said goodbye to Greg, assuming the Impala was her ride. She opened the door, exchanged a quick word with the driver, and got into the back seat. The car sped off immediately. Meanwhile, the actual Uber she had ordered arrived at the pickup location, but the driver couldn't find Samantha and eventually canceled the request and left. The black Chevrolet Impala circled the area several times before targeting Samantha. This behavior suggests that the driver was aware of the college students who congregated on 5 Point streets after the bars closed, waiting for the car to leave. Meanwhile, Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, had been tracking her movements using the Find My Friends app to make sure she got home safely. He noticed that she was moving in the opposite direction of her apartment, which initially did not raise any concerns because he thought she might be visiting a friend. However, when he texted her to check in, he received no response. Greg tried calling Samantha, but she didn't answer. He sent her multiple texts, but they showed up as delivered, not read. This meant Samantha wasn't reading his messages. Her phone's location stopped sharing, which surprised Greg because it had never happened before. He thought maybe she had left her phone in the Uber. Concerned, Greg contacted her friends and roommate to see if they had heard from her or if she had made it home safely. However, no one had any news about her whereabouts. Greg decided to rest, hoping Samantha would show up tomorrow morning. The next morning, Samantha was missing. Her roommates filed a missing person report. Her boyfriend, Greg, drove 2 hours to Columbia to help search for her. Shortly after the report was filed, a group of turkey hunters found the body of a young woman in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles from 5 Points. The hunters immediately called 911 after the discovery, and the local sheriff's office quickly dispatched deputies to the scene. The body was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson. An autopsy revealed that Samantha's body had more than 120 separate stab wounds affecting multiple areas, including her face, head, neck, arms, torso, legs, and feet. In an attempt to defend herself, her fingernails were severely damaged as she tried to evade a sharp object. Evidence suggested a double-edged knife had been used, and she had then been dragged into the woods. An autopsy revealed that her body contained only 20 milliliters of blood. Samantha had suffered severe blood loss. Police quickly obtained surveillance footage from the bar the night of the incident, which showed Samantha getting into a black Chevrolet Impala. The footage showed the car circling the block several times. Police discovered that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha had called arrived a short time later. However, when the driver realized that Samantha was not there, he canceled the ride and left. Police believe that the suspect may have used a childproof lock to lock her inside, as when the childproof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of the car, so Samantha would not have been able to get out at that point. A description of the vehicle was released to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator, and shortly after, police spotted a black Chevrolet Impala during a 3 a.m. patrol on March 30th, while patrolling the area where Samantha was abducted. When the police stopped the car, the driver immediately jumped out and started running. After a short chase, he was arrested. When police checked his ID, they discovered that the man arrested was Nathaniel Rowland, 24, of New Zion. During a search of the vehicle, patrol officers discovered a child car seat in the back, surrounded by blood stains. This discovery prompted them to call for backup, as police suspected it was a crime scene. Homicide detectives were called to investigate and conducted a thorough search of the vehicle. They discovered multiple blood stains on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was found on the floor of the car. Police later discovered that Nathaniel had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he had refused their offer of $125 and left the phone in the car. Police also found that the child locks were activated, which Nathaniel had used to lock Samantha inside. Several cleaning products, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes, were found in the car. Nathaniel had cleaned his car, but there was still a trace of blood in the car. During questioning, Nathaniel repeatedly denied any involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. He maintained his innocence. Police searching Nathaniel's body discovered traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. However, no DNA from Nathaniel was found on Samantha's body. Police pieced together the evidence and speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack. The fact that the child-proof locks in the car were still active at the time of Nathaniel's arrest led them to conclude that he must have activated the feature as soon as Samantha got into the car. Nathaniel suddenly stabbed her multiple times with a double-edged knife. Taken by surprise by the brutality of the attack, she struggled to fend off the blows, which explains the multiple stab wounds to her hands and the severe damage to her fingernails. Samantha was attacked by Nathaniel, who scratched Nathaniel's hand, leaving skin cells under her fingernails as evidence. After the attack, Nathaniel drove to a remote road in New Zion and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Nathaniel posted on social media, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Nathaniel's neighborhood is minutes away from where Samantha's body was found. A background check on Nathaniel showed that he attended South Carolina State University in 2017. However, there is no record of him graduating, and it is unclear what job he was doing at the time of the incident. Nathaniel was previously arrested for assaulting and robbing a woman in October 2018. Police searched Nathaniel's girlfriend, Maria Howard's apartment in New Zion, where he was living. They found evidence in a trash can behind the apartment, including a sock and towel with blood stains on it, which belonged to Nathaniel. The blood was later determined to be Samantha's. Police also discovered a blood-stained white cloth, duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a double-edged knife with obvious blood stains. Tests later confirmed that blood found on the double-edged knife, bed sheets, car, and bleach wipes matched Samantha Josephson. Nathaniel was charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial took place. Nathaniel maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him. In the summer of 2021, Nathaniel's defense team argued that he was innocent, as there was no DNA of his on Samantha. Prosecutors countered Nathaniel's claim of innocence with a large amount of evidence gathered in the case. Key evidence included CCTV footage showing Nathaniel's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, as well as several incriminating physical pieces of evidence found in his car. Additionally, cell phone tracking showed that Nathaniel and Samantha's phones were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Nathaniel lived near where Samantha's body was discovered. The prosecution presented 31 witnesses, including a person who saw Nathaniel cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that her daughter had blood on her shoes after being in Nathaniel's car. After the murder, Nathaniel did not contact any witnesses to testify in his favor, and no members of Nathaniel's family came forward to defend him. Despite this, Nathaniel maintained his innocence and appealed to the judge. The jury deliberated for only an hour before returning a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Isla Reynolds. Isla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. She is a beautiful girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a cute smile. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, Justin suspected that he was not the father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Isla, Justin took a paternity test in July 2010, which confirmed that Isla was his daughter. As a result, he was ordered by Child Protective Services to pay child support in December of that year. Trista and Justin agreed that Isla would be raised by Trista. Trista and her daughter live in Portland. It wasn't until mid-2011, after Isla's first birthday, that Justin began visiting her. He lived an hour and a half away, and Justin would visit Isla during the day. Trista and Justin agreed that Justin could take Isla out, but not stay overnight. After a while, Trista got a new boyfriend, Raymond. Trista became pregnant, and in 2011, the family welcomed a new member. Trista would raise both children. Everything changed on October 13, 2011, when Trista met with Child Protective Services. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting remain unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave Trista a choice. Trista would go to rehab, where she would lose custody of the children. Trista immediately entered a 10-day rehab program and left her daughter with her mother and sister. Trista was determined not to lose custody. By October 2011, Justin had seen Isla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista began rehab, on October 17, Justin and his family decided they wanted to take custody of Isla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPietro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to adopt Isla. Child Protective Services quickly notified Trista's relatives of their decision. After being granted permission, Justin and his family picked up Isla but did not know her exact address. Child Protective officials provided the location through police officer Charles Weaver, who accompanied Justin and Justin's mother Phoebe to the home of Isla's aunt, Jessica. Justin's mother Phoebe waited in the car while Justin and the police entered the house to pick up Isla. A tense situation occurred. Isla's mother Jessica begged the police not to take Isla away and warned that she would not hand over the child to anyone. The police observed that Isla was very happy, constantly laughing and playing. However, when Justin appeared, Isla began to cry and tried to move away from him. Despite this, the police officer still handed the child over to Justin. When Isla was handed over to Justin, she struggled and screamed. She even tried to bite the officer. Child Protective Services supervisor Charles was told by the officer that Isla hated her father and that they could not give the child to Justin. But Charles said that it was not his decision. He was just there to carry out Child Services orders. For Justin to have formal custody of Isla, he would have to get the consent of Isla's mother, Trista, or go through a court process to have the child approved by a judge. In this case, there was no agreement or court process. Instead, the Child Protective Services supervisor's decision to place the child was valid. Child Protective Services supervisor Charles gave custody of Isla to Justin. He then took Isla to the house in Waterville where he lived with his 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and Elisha's daughter, Gabriella. Justin, 25, lived in a large room in the partially finished basement, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. During this time, Trista called Justin every day to talk to Isla. On October 20, 2011, while Trista was in treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Isla's case. Attendees included Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista and her sister Jessica, and their attorneys. Justin also attended the meeting by phone. The meeting resulted in an agreement that Isla would be returned to her mother on October 22, 2011, immediately after Trista completed her drug treatment program. In addition, Justin agreed to take Isla to the treatment center on the 21st to visit her mother. Initially, things went well for Trista. However, the decision was reversed. In her desperation to get her daughter back, Trista called Child Protective Services several times to ask them to help enforce the agreement. Unable to reach them, Trista attempted to negotiate with Justin to reach a temporary agreement. Under the agreement, Justin would continue to care for Isla and Trista would be allowed regular visits. On November 12, 2011, Justin took Isla to the emergency room. After a doctor examined her, they determined that Isla had a fractured elbow. According to Justin, the accident occurred the night before, November 11th. It was raining at the time and Justin believed that he had slipped and fallen on her while holding her on the porch. Initially, Justin thought that she was not seriously injured because although she was crying, she seemed fine. However, it was not until the next morning that Justin noticed that Isla had injured her hand, so he took her to the hospital. By the following Monday, the orthopedist concluded that surgery was not necessary and that Isla's injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26, during Isla's third visit, the specialist said that Isla's condition was improving and that she was slowly recovering. Trista was at the hospital to monitor her daughter's health. Never thought that this would be the last time Trista would hold her daughter in her arms. From that moment on, things went from bad to worse. Tired of fighting over custody, visitation rights, and even the right to talk to her on the phone, Trista filed a lawsuit to gain custody of her daughter. On December 15, 2011, Trista filed a lawsuit for custody of Isla. Custody of Isla was awarded to her just 2 days later on Saturday, December 17. Justin called the police in the morning to report Isla missing from his mother's house, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and sister Alicia. Justin assured them that the police had put Isla to bed the night before and that when they woke up, Isla had disappeared early that morning. Trista travels to a coastal town in Maine to visit her boyfriend Raymond. She falls asleep on the couch while Raymond's father, Robert, drives. When Robert received a call from Trista's father informing him that Isla was missing, Robert was shocked and found a suitable place to stop the car and wake Trista. Trista was still sleepy, but when she heard her father's voice herself, she began to understand that she had no idea where her daughter was. In desperation, Trista changed direction to look for Isla. The trip to the police station lasted an hour, but for Trista, it felt like a century. She called Justin several times to find out what had happened, but there was no response. When they got to the police station, both Trista and her father-in-law Robert gave statements. After about 30 minutes, Trista's father arrived at the police station with them, angry and upset. Justin called 911 on Saturday morning at 8:49 to report Isla missing. He said he last saw Isla the night before at 10 p.m., when his sister Alicia checked on Isla before going to bed. However, when they woke up the next morning, they discovered that Isla had disappeared from her crib. Justin suspected that an unknown intruder had taken Isla. News of Isla's disappearance quickly spread to the police. The sheriff told the media that the case was being actively investigated and their goal was to find Isla at all costs. Police continued to search the house for more clues. On Sunday, December 18th, police dogs were deployed and searched the area around the house where Isla was. Trista's house also underwent a thorough search. On Monday, December 19th, the FBI requested assistance in the search. By this time, 75 people from various agencies were involved in the search. The state police had seized 2 vehicles. One was a 1996 Ford Explorer, owned by Justin, and the other was a silver car, owned by Justin's girlfriend Courtney, who was also present on the night of the disappearance. On Wednesday evening, Justin made his first statement to the media. He was calm and claimed he did not know what happened to Isla. Justin also said that he and his family would support the investigation and do everything possible to find Isla. Justin said that Trista had agreed to let him raise the child. Justin also said that Trista was incapable of caring for Isla. As of day 10, a $30,000 reward has been offered for anyone who can provide a lead to Isla's rescue, and 330 leads have been followed. The operation also involved about 50 volunteers from the Search and Rescue Association. The sheriff has transferred the investigation to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. At that time, an announcement was made that the case was no longer a search for a missing girl but was being treated as a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin tried to avoid the media but later appeared more frequently. During an appearance on the Today's Show, Justin claimed that Isla had been kidnapped and wanted the kidnapper to return Isla. When asked about Justin's silence in the early days of Isla's disappearance, he justified himself by saying that he thought Isla would return. He also claimed that the police had advised him to stay away from the press. The police explained that this was only told to him at first. Later, the police encouraged Isla's parents to continue to appear in public. In late January, police revealed a major discovery. Isla's blood was found in multiple locations throughout Justin's home. In his 1996 Ford Explorer, they discovered a child seat in the back with Isla's blood on the left shoulder strap. In Isla's bedroom, police found blood on some of Isla's princess pink sneakers on the floor next to the crib, as well as on the doll's face and arms. This suggests that Isla may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. Additionally, a blood stain was found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood stains were concentrated in the basement. A pool of Isla's blood stained the center of the mattress that Justin shared with Courtney. Justin's sneakers were also found with Isla's blood on them. Police also discovered blood splatters on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls. These splatters matched Isla's height. Additionally, experts determined that some of the blood splatters in the house were likely caused by Isla coughing, suggesting that Isla's injuries were both internal and external. This suggests that Isla may have been severely injured and may have been brutally attacked. Police said the bed sheet was used to clean Isla's blood. When they learned this information, Trista and her family were shocked and could not believe it. Police warned them that the evidence that was about to be revealed would be even more horrifying. Luminol tests were performed on the house, revealing blood stains that were not visible to the naked eye. Photos taken at the scene left Trista in great pain. After viewing these photos, she left the police station in a state of panic. The police said there were more photos to show her, but Trista refused to see them. She said she had enough. According to reports, when police showed Justin and his family the photos, he had no reaction. After learning of the police information, Trista shared with the press that despite her feelings of grief and helplessness, Isla's father, Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. In September 2013, Trista wrote a bombshell letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had been given by the police. She was tired of waiting and wanted to rekindle public interest in Isla's case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. Alicia opened the door and the journalists asked about the blood evidence. Justin's mother explained that Isla was lactose intolerant and had been vomiting. However, a quick internet search shows that common symptoms of lactose intolerance are gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea, while nausea and vomiting are listed, but they are not the most common symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. Then, in 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Isla dead. Based on her father, Justin, reporting that Isla had gone missing on December 17, 2011, Trista and her attorney then filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin. By that time, Justin had disappeared, and he and his attorneys denied any wrongdoing, arguing that there was no concrete evidence. Earlier this year, 2023, a judge granted Trista's petition to include Phoebe and Alicia in the wrongful death lawsuit. Justin is facing civil charges for murder. Additionally, Justin faces charges of breach of parental duty of care for a minor. Both Trista and her attorney know that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the goal of the lawsuit. Their goal is to get information and facts out. There are many strange things about Isla's disappearance. While Isla was with Justin, he called the friend who sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Isla a few weeks ago. It is worth noting that Justin stayed at this friend's house while detectives investigated Isla's disappearance. Claimed that Justin had not been involved in the child's life during the 9 months of pregnancy and when Isla was just over a year old. Trista also revealed that she had received strange messages from Justin on the day he brought Isla home. He mentioned being afraid that someone would try to kidnap or take Isla away. The last time he said something similar was around December 11th, 6 days before Isla was reported missing. After Isla went missing, the messages became more surprising and confusing. The end of the case. Poor Isla is still not found. Those responsible for Isla's death. Still no punishment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Ann Thompson Harris. Christina Ann Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, 40, had been married for 11 years as of 2014, having tied the knot in 2003 following a 5-year courtship. The couple welcomed their first child in 2009, which brought about significant lifestyle changes. Despite the challenges that came with parenthood and daily responsibilities, they appeared to be content with their new life. Christina managed the household and cared for their child, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As their child grew older, Christina had the opportunity to contribute to the family income by getting a job. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave due to her second pregnancy. Their daughter was born healthy, but tragically, she would only get to see her mother through photographs as she grew up. On September 29, 2014, Jason had a brief conversation with his wife Christina before leaving for work. Despite being unwell with a cold and severe cough that had disrupted her sleep, Christina reassured Jason she was okay. However, a few hours later, Jason grew concerned when Christina didn't answer his call to check on her. Unsuccessful in reaching his wife, Jason asked a neighbor to visit their home and check on Christina, explaining her condition and unavailability. The neighbor found the front door unlocked, and upon entering the bedroom, discovered Christina lying unresponsive on the bed. The neighbor promptly called 911 and then sought help from another neighbor, a registered nurse, who sadly confirmed Christina's death after checking her pulse. 2 days after Christina's death, the medical examiner determined that the cause was an overdose of a banned substance. This verdict stunned her family and friends, who were convinced she had never touched illegal drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy May, disputed the finding and told the police that her daughter had seemed well when they last met, the day before her death. The police then questioned Jason Harris's claim that his wife was battling a cold. According to Kathy May, Christina had confided in her about the difficulties in her marriage to Jason, who was unhappy but reluctant to divorce due to concerns about child support and custody of their 2 kids. The neighbors who discovered Christina's body provided the police with some interesting information. They claimed that Jason had told them that the night before his wife's death, he had made her a bowl of cereal with milk, and while they were eating, Christina suddenly lost consciousness and dropped the plate. The police were aware that it would be difficult for Christina's loved ones to accept that someone they knew so well had a secret dark side. However, as the investigation progressed, the police began to question whether Christina had indeed taken any illegal substances. Despite the official findings, Christina's family refused to give up, convinced that Jason Harris was involved in her death. Christina's mother and sisters persuaded the police to test her breast milk, which led to a historic first in Michigan, using breast milk as evidence. Despite the trust of her family, neighbors, and colleagues that Christina didn't use illegal substances, her milk was tested. Notably, her workplace and the hospital where she gave birth to her second child had already tested her for prohibited substances, with negative results. At the time of Christina's death, her second child was 4 months old, and she had been breastfeeding. Both Christina's mother and Harris confirmed that she was cautious about her consumption due to breastfeeding, as she didn't want to harm her baby. Christina would express and freeze her breast milk, with some bags stored at her mother's house. The police examined 3 dated bags of frozen milk, which revealed no traces of banned substances. The expert analysis included milk samples frozen shortly before Christina's death, indicating she didn't consume the substance that caused her death. Only one person claimed that Christina had used banned substances, and that was Jason Harris's sister. This led investigators to take a closer look at Jason and consider the possibility that Christina's death was a deliberate act of deprivation of life. The investigation was slow going, and it's unclear how it would have turned out if Christina's family hadn't been actively involved in uncovering the truth. Christina's mother constantly reminded the Davidson police about her daughter, and in August 2016, almost 2 years after Christina's death, Kathy Mays successfully got the Davidson police to hand the case over to the Michigan State Police, with new investigators taking over. As the story unfolded, they discovered a lot of information about Jason Harris's character and behavior before and after his wife's death. Harris had been having multiple affairs, and Christina was aware of them, confiding in family and co-workers that Harris had been texting another woman even while she was in the hospital giving birth to their youngest child via C-section. Christina told a co-worker that if she turned up dead, it would be because of Harris, and when asked if she was serious, she confirmed that she was. Harris told his co-workers that he doubted the paternity of their second child and often complained that after giving birth, Christina was depressed, staying in bed, and refusing to go to work. He also frequently complained about her nagging him. One of Harris's co-workers believed that Harris might have told the police that he had expressed a wish for Christina to be dead. He described Harris and Christina's relationship as toxic, recalling that they frequently argued. One of the most astonishing aspects of this case was Jason Harris's openness about wanting to get rid of his wife, Christina. Despite making attempts to harm her, nobody took his words and actions seriously until her death. Harris purchased substances which he mixed into her drinks on at least 2 occasions. However, Christina detected an unusual taste and refused to consume the beverages. He then asked a co-worker for a substance that would not alter the taste or smell of drinks or food, claiming he wanted to knock her out so she wouldn't feel anything. When Harris told a co-worker that Christina didn't drink the tainted water because of its funny taste, the co-worker declined to provide him with more pills. The co-worker testified that Harris had told him he wanted Christina to stop nagging him, but the co-worker thought Harris was joking. Harris even told a co-worker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the hitman was arrested before he could carry out the task. Harris then asked the same co-worker to kill Christina in exchange for $10,000 from her $100,000 life insurance policy. The co-worker refused, believing Harris was venting frustrations and that the offer was merely a poor joke. He remembered the conversation as Harris saying, "I'm tired of her, I'm going to get rid of her." On September 29, 2014, Harris dropped off his 2 children at daycare on his way to work. Later that morning, he sent a text to a neighbor asking her to check on his wife Christina because she wasn't answering his calls. The neighbor arrived at the house and saw the family van in the driveway, but Christina didn't come to the door. The neighbor entered the house and found Christina lying unresponsive in bed. She asked Harris if she should try to wake her up, and he said Christina had probably overslept and that he was on his way home. The neighbor then went back inside and found Christina feeling cold, with foam coming from her mouth and nose. She called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The 911 operator asked if there were any needles present, but the neighbor didn't see any. The registered nurse neighbor testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She didn't attempt to resuscitate Christina because she was already dead. When the paramedics arrived, they pronounced Christina dead at the scene. Harris informed his supervisor that he had requested a neighbor to check on Christina and that he needed to return home because Christina was unresponsive when he arrived at the house. However, witnesses reported that Harris did not appear concerned or rushed, and he entered the house without notifying the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina. Later that morning, Harris contacted Christina's supervisor at work, informing her that Christina had passed away the previous night and inquiring about collecting the $100,000 death benefit on Christina's life insurance policy through her employer. One of the women with whom Harris was intimate told investigators that Harris reached out to her on the day of Christina's death, claiming that his wife had died from taking an excessive amount of a banned substance, implying that he knew the cause of Christina's death before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor Harris had asked to check on Christina saw him in the driveway. Harris stated that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was, and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad about Christina. He claimed that Christina had dropped her bowl of cereal and that he told her to go to bed. Harris also told the neighbor that his wife was restless, tossing, turning, and thrashing around during the night, and that he had heard her cough before he left for work, wondering if that had been her last breath. Harris told a police officer that Christina had been coughing a lot when he left the home, and that Christina had fallen asleep while eating cereal the night before her death. Finally, Harris informed Christina's mother that Christina had complained about her water tasting of chemicals before she died. In this case, a key motive was financial gain. Within a week of Christina's death, Harris and his mother personally visited Christina's workplace to ask about her life insurance payout. Moreover, Harris received a $20,000 death benefit from his employer's life insurance policy soon after Christina's death. One of Harris's mistresses moved in with him and his children. Although Christina's mother thought the mistress moved in after the funeral, Harris's neighbor testified that the mistress had already moved in before the funeral. The neighbor also stated that Harris's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the house just days after Christina's death. Police found that Jason Harris had bought a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman he had exchanged over 5,800 texts with. The county medical examiner, Dr. Brian Hunter, sent Christina's post-mortem blood and urine samples to a lab for testing. Initially, Dr. Hunter thought Christina's death was an accident, but there were no needle marks on her body, and investigators didn't find any drug residue or rolling paper near the bed where she died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. Later, in 2019, after being questioned in a wrongful death lawsuit brought by Christina's family, and after reviewing the police file, Dr. Hunter changed the manner of Christina's death on her death certificate and post-mortem report from accidental to homicide. The police charged Harris with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance causing death. He was refused bail. Nicholas Robinson, Harris's attorney, said his client has pled not guilty to this matter and looks forward to contesting these charges. By the time of his arrest, Harris had lost his job due to a positive test for banned substances. The efforts made by Kathy Mays to ensure that law enforcement agencies punish the perpetrator of her daughter's death did not go unnoticed. Genesee County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years back, he started receiving Facebook and email messages from a woman from Davidson, claiming that her daughter had recently died and that it was not an accident. The woman, Kathy Mays, was able to capture Layton's attention, and authorities began reviewing the death of her daughter. Kathy Mays recalled the words her daughter's mother wrote in an email. "Mr. Prosecutor, you are my last hope, the last chance we have to see justice through for my daughter. please help me?" Leighton stated, "I was, and remain to this day, thoroughly convinced that her daughter's death was not accidental, but rather the result of foul play." However, it was Mays's relentless pursuit of justice for her daughter that ultimately led to this moment, and it is her effort that prompted Leighton and his office to present her with the Crime Victim Advocate of the Year award. Mays thanked Leighton for the award, presented to her in a room filled with about 40 people. Mays said, "The accused have well-defined rights, but the victim's rights are not so defined. Communicate through email, phone calls, talking to people, and learn the jargon that's coming at you from the professionals. You are your loved one's best advocate." Mays recounted that in September 2014, she received a call informing her that her daughter had not woken up, and instantly she suspected her husband's involvement. Through her journey to becoming a victim's advocate, a role she was previously unaware of, Mays shared the valuable lessons she learned. Victims should not take for granted that an investigation will occur, and even if one does, it's not guaranteed that the investigators will have the necessary expertise in the specific crime they're investigating. It's essential to be proactive rather than passive when seeking justice for your loved one. Moreover, don't expect to receive regular or progress updates. The trial started in 2021. Prosecutors alleged that Harris intentionally laced his wife's cereal with a prohibited substance, aiming to end her life. He then went to work, waited a few hours, and asked the neighbor to check on Christina Harris, seemingly wanting someone else to discover her lifeless body, thereby diverting suspicion from himself. According to the prosecutor, Harris had multiple motives for killing Christina. He was involved with other women, suspected her of infidelity, doubted the paternity of their second child, and was frustrated with her constant nagging. Harris openly confessed to multiple individuals that he was against divorce, unwilling to pay child support, and unwilling to lose custody of their children. Prior to Christina's death, he confided in a coworker that he wished she would pass away on the morning of her actual death. Harris contacted Christina's employer to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and during this conversation, he falsely claimed that Christina had died the previous night. The jury was presented with conclusive proof that Harris wanted Christina dead and had even attempted to hire an assassin. He had devised a plan to achieve this and was aware of where to obtain illegal substances. In fact, he repeatedly purchased these substances with the intention of administering them to Christina. Multiple witnesses testified during the trial that Christina refrained from recreational drug use and was meticulous about what she consumed, given her breastfeeding responsibilities. Furthermore, tests on her frozen breast milk yielded negative results for the substances, lending credence to the theory that Harris had contaminated Christina's food. Prosecution presented the results of the toxicological examination, and Dr. Judge stated that Christina's death was compatible with swallowing a substance. The prosecution dismissed the possibility of an injection because there were no injection marks or a needle found. Dr. Judge added that it was also unlikely that the substance was snorted, as neither a rolled-up dollar bill nor any paper used for this purpose was found at the scene. Jason Harris was given the opportunity to address the court, but he failed to apologize or express remorse. Instead, he maintained his innocence. The jury, however, saw through his deception and revealed him to be a selfish, murderous, and dishonest individual, as the judge remarked on November 17, 2021. The jury ultimately found 47-year-old Harris guilty on all charges brought against him. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced Harris to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Undeterred, Harris proceeded to appeal the verdict. In a statement, prosecutor David Leighton extended his sincerest condolences to the family and friends of Christina Harris, describing the case as tragic and hoping that the verdict would bring some measure of comfort as they continued to mourn. Harris requested a new trial, citing his trial lawyer's ineffective assistance. Specifically, he argued that his lawyer failed to obtain an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and did not consult with an independent toxicologist. The lawyer's trial strategy had been to show that Dr. Hunter's opinion on the manner of death was based on flawed information. The prosecution responded by submitting an affidavit from Jason Harris's trial lawyer, who clarified that he had chosen not to obtain an independent expert opinion to counter the prosecution's expert witness. Instead, his strategy was to highlight that Dr. Hunter had altered his opinion on the manner of death due to being presented with inaccurate information and circumstances over a 3-year period, which was influenced by pressure from the victim's family. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction, and as a result, he will spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Munoz. Maria Munoz was born on January 25, 1989, to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz, and was one of 3 children. Growing up in a loving and vibrant household in Puerto Rico, Maria faced a devastating loss when her mother passed away at a young age. It was around this time that she met Joel Pellet. Despite this hardship, Maria took on the responsibility of caring for her siblings, Marisol Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Maria and Pellet, who was 11 years older, initially met in Puerto Rico, where Maria was born and raised. At the time, Pellet was a nursing student with ambitious dreams, and Maria was also pursuing a nursing career. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. Following their marriage, the couple relocated to Laredo, Texas, where Pellet secured a prestigious position as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital, earning a substantial income. Their newfound financial stability enabled them to live a life of opulence, marked by luxury cars and extravagant vacations. Maria Munoz, a devoted mother, lived in Laredo, Texas, with her husband Joel Pellet, 40, and their 2 young sons. After leaving her job, she dedicated herself to caring for her family full-time. Maria adored her boys and prioritized their needs, taking them to the park daily and reading to them before bedtime. Although she savored every moment at home, she also made time for her passion, playing the piano. Despite her contentment, Maria held on to her aspiration of furthering her education and resuming her nursing career. Pellet's relationship seemed perfect, but beneath the surface, a different story emerged. After his second son's birth in 2018, people noticed changes in his behavior. He lost weight, gained muscle, and became flirtatious with other women. He stopped posting family photos, instead sharing solo pictures, giving the impression of a single, carefree life. Pellet's colleagues noticed his growing closeness to surgical nurse Janet Arando. As time passed, it became clear they were having a secretive affair. In 2020, Maria found airline tickets Pellet bought for himself and Janet to travel to Europe. This discovery left Maria shattered, feeling betrayed and devastated by their decade-long facade. She sought a therapist's help to cope with her emotional turmoil and was prescribed medication to support her mental health struggles. Around this time, Maria started writing in journals to cope with her thoughts and feelings. As tensions between Pellet and Maria increased, a confrontation occurred on September 19, 2020, when Maria visited Janet's house and found Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Maria confronted Pellet, forcing him to choose between her and Janet. Pellet chose Janet, leading to an argument that prompted Janet to call the police. However, Maria and Pellet had left before the police arrived. Later, the police called Maria while she was in the car with Pellet, and they could hear him yelling at her in the background. Once they got home, Pellet's anger escalated, and he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, demonstrating his intense anger. The next morning, on September 20th, Maria sent Pellet a text message, stating her intention to hire a lawyer to resolve their situation. However, Pellet responded, suggesting they handle the matter without lawyers, as he believed it would be too expensive. Just hours after their text conversation, Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He emailed Maria, expressing his profound sadness and inner turmoil. In the email, he conveyed his desire to have a genuine and calm conversation with Maria, free from argument. Maria replied, and they agreed to meet the following evening, around 5 p.m. on Monday, September 21st. Before meeting him, Maria was extremely nervous and messaged her friend Yasmin Martinez about the planned meeting. Unfortunately, the encounter ended in a terrifying way. The next day, September 22nd, 2020, Pellet frantically called 911, saying his wife might have taken prescription pills and was no longer breathing. Officer DEA Cruz arrived at Pellet's house around 1:40 a.m., with his body cam recording the entire scene. He found Pellet at the top of the stairs, near the main bedroom, where he was still wearing his green hospital scrubs and performing CPR on his wife. Their 2 sons were asleep in nearby rooms. Once the paramedics arrived, they took over CPR efforts on Maria. Officer asked Pellet about pills Maria took. Pellet fetched a bottle with clonazepam prescription from the bathroom, but it was in his name, not Maria's. The bottle was unusually back in the cabinet. Body cam footage showed Pellet pocketing the pill container. DEA Cruz suspected he concealed something. A needle catheter on the stairs and a medical bag with syringes outside a clinical setting raised more questions. Pellet informed the officers that Maria had been battling severe depression lately, which had taken a toll on her mental health. According to him, her desperation to deal with her overwhelming emotions led her to take the pills as a last resort. Despite efforts, Maria was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. Pellet was questioned, explaining he and Maria had a conversation, became intimate, and he took a shower. When he returned, Maria was unresponsive and not breathing. Officer notices Pellet's suspicious behavior, excessive sweating and evasive answers, contrasting with others. This raises suspicions, and Sergeant Lismata takes him in for questioning. Upon arrival, Pellet was left alone in the interrogation room for a period before an officer entered. Unbeknownst to Pellet, his actions were being recorded on video. When the officers reviewed the footage, they were shocked to see Pellet's sudden, extreme behavior. He began screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. His loud, out-of-control outburst caused a stir among people in the hallway and nearby rooms, who were frightened by the commotion coming from his room. Sergeant Louis Mata spoke with Pellet at 4 a.m. Pellet confessed to having an affair with Janet, whom he'd left the family home for 5 months prior. Maria knew about it. Pellet visited the family home, they talked and became intimate. He gave her clonazepam for anxiety and depression, but didn't know how much she took. He found her unresponsive 10 minutes later. After questioning, Maria's autopsy was performed just 8 hours after her death. This timely autopsy allowed for detection of any substances in her stomach contents. The results revealed a surprise: no pill fragments, but a small, red pinprick mark on her elbow, suggesting an injection. This finding shifted the investigation's focus. Maria's journal, found by investigators, revealed her anxiety and depression struggles. Her writings exposed her deep love for her husband and desire to save their family despite his infidelity. Entries disclosed her husband's abuse, her grief, and her longing to escape sadness. One plea read, "I don't want to be sad anymore. Bring me laughter, bring me peace, bring me happiness again." The day before Maria Munoz's untimely death, she wrote in her journal, revealed her desire to live and move forward with her life. There was no hint of suicide or plans to end her life. As a result, after reviewing her journal, investigators initially ruled out suicide as a possibility. They needed more information to understand what had really happened. Sergeants Mata and Cruz received toxicology test results contradicting Pellet's claim about Maria having clonazepam. Instead, the tests revealed 7 surgical drugs in her system: morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, Leanne, and Naren. Notably, propofol and ketamine are sedatives and pain management drugs, typically used intravenously during operations. The discovery of propofol in Maria's body was the most startling revelation for the investigators. Given his profession as a nurse anesthetist, they suspected that Pellet would have had access to the drug. Dr. Hunzinger, who had worked with Pellet and was familiar with propofol, was shocked by the unusually high amount found in Maria's system, the highest he had ever seen. This led the doctors to strongly suspect that propofol was the direct cause of Maria's death, as Pellet would have known the correct dosage to sedate someone or cause an overdose. Furthermore, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested that she may have been injected with a substance. The investigators believed they had sufficient evidence to arrest Pellet for his wife's murder, based on the toxicological report, his suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal. An arrest warrant was quickly obtained, and DEA crews promptly apprehended Pellet, who offered no resistance, almost as if he had anticipated his arrest. Pellet was then taken to the police station, marking the beginning of a new phase in the investigation as law enforcement officials prepared to question him further about the events surrounding Maria's tragic death. The trial began on March 21, 2023, with both the prosecution and defense presenting their arguments. The prosecution team, comprising only women and dubbed Maria's team, built a strong case against Pellet by using Maria Munoz's journal entries. This approach aimed to showcase Maria's personality to the jury, highlighting her qualities as a wife and mother. Through her journals, the prosecutors painted a picture of Maria as a caring, intelligent, and excellent mother, conveying her lively spirit to the jurors. During the trial, prosecutors suspected that Pellet drugged Maria by putting substances in her drink, making her sleepy. After she became unconscious, they believed he injected propofol into her arm. Prosecutors also thought Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911 so that responders would be unable to rescue Maria when they arrived. The journals helped prosecutors understand the challenges Maria faced, strengthening their resolve to seek justice in her case. Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, argued that his client wanted to reconcile with wife Maria Munoz before her death, citing uncertain cause of death and insufficient evidence. Bali noted Pellet gave Maria a drug to reverse overdoses on the night she died, and both struggled with addiction, with no signs of force or coercion. After investigating Maria's social circles, friends, and family, it became clear that she was not a drug addict. It was evident that Pellet was the only person who could have provided her with the substantial quantity of propofol found in her system. Additionally, authorities convinced Pellet's girlfriend, Janet Avendano, a surgical nurse, to testify against him. She revealed that Pellet had confided in her, admitting that he gave Maria something to calm her down. Avendano also confirmed that Pellet had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury reached a verdict in under an hour, following a 9-day trial. On March 30, 2023, the jury found Pellet guilty of Maria's murder. He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison on April 27, 2023, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. Joel Pellet is currently imprisoned for life at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice facility, serving time for his cruel actions. His imprisonment serves as a reminder that criminals will be held accountable and that Maria's memory will be honored through the pursuit of truth and justice. The reason behind Maria's murder is still unclear, but according to the prosecution, Joel Pellet killed his wife to end their marriage and start a new life with his girlfriend, Janet Avendano. In the end, justice prevailed, and the verdict ensured that Pellet was punished for his crime. The jury's decision brings some closure to this tragic case, sending a clear message that such brutal acts will not go unpunished. The conviction highlights the importance of upholding justice and serves as a warning to those who commit similar crimes that they will face the full force of the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Allison Baden Clay. Allison Baden was born on July 1, 1968 in a Brisbane suburb. Raised in an affluent family, she developed a passion for ballet early on. After school, she pursued higher education, excelling academically and mastering 6 languages. At 25 in 1993, Allison won a local beauty pageant, showcasing her ballet skills. Following university, she secured a position in the HR department at Brisbane's Flight Centre, where her career quickly advanced, recognized by her boss as a bright and promising talent. It was here that Allison met Gerard, who would later become her husband. Gerard Baden-Clay was born on September 9, 1970, in Bournemouth, UK. He came from a notable lineage, with his great-grandfather, Robert Baden-Powell, being a famed British military leader and founder of the Scouting movement. Gerard was just a year old when his family moved to Zambia, his father Nigel Clay's homeland. After 8 years in Zambia, they immigrated to Australia. Gerard completed his education in Australia and pursued a degree in accounting. He eventually joined the Flight Centre for work, where he met Allison's. It was at the Flight Centre where Gerard encountered Allison, leading to a blossoming relationship. Gerard and Allison Baden-Clay exchanged vows on August 23, 1997. Following their nuptials, they embarked on a global tour, including stops in South America, Switzerland, and a stint in London. Once back in Australia, Allison resumed her career at the Flight Centre, eventually rising to a management position. In 2002, she became pregnant and later gave birth to their first child, Hannah. After Hannah's birth, Allison chose to dedicate herself entirely to family life. During this period, Gerard explored various occupations and established a premium real estate agency in Brisbane in 2004, with his parents' involvement in the business. Known for his lively and self-assured demeanor, Gerard dedicated substantial time and effort to his work. The family grew with the birth of their second daughter, Sarah, in 2004, and their youngest, Ella, in 2006. They lived in a verdant home situated in the suburban area of Brookfield, Brisbane. Allison, primarily a homemaker, was deeply engaged in caring for her daughters. Over time, Allison noticed that Gerard was becoming increasingly distant and aloof. This reached a climax when he made the shocking admission that he no longer loved her. Gerard's behavior towards Allison changed, with him frequently criticizing her. He would berate her for making unappealing meals or for not keeping their home clean, sometimes labeling Allison as lazy and expressing that she no longer appealed to him romantically. In the face of these remarks, Allison chose to remain quiet, enduring the harshness of his words. She maintained a personal diary where she documented her enduring love for Gerard, the recurring disputes at home, her own feelings of guilt, and her determination to correct her perceived faults in hopes of rekindling his affection. Despite the turmoil within her family life, Allison managed to mask her inner struggles with an outward appearance of cheerfulness. She was consistently seen as a warm, benevolent individual, a devoted mother, and a loving spouse. In 2011, after the devastating floods in Queensland, Gerard's business faced financial difficulties, accumulating debts of approximately $1 million Australian dollars. That October, Allison discovered that Gerard was engaged in a secret affair with Tony McHugh, a colleague at his agency. Gerard and Tony had first crossed paths in 2008 when she was a client, and later, he hired her. At that time, Tony, a 17-year marriage veteran with children, was experiencing marital troubles. The affair with Gerard quickly escalated, culminating in her divorce. Tony was aware of Gerard's marital status. He had portrayed his relationship with Allison as platonic, claiming their marriage lacked intimacy and that he remained with Allison solely for their daughters. Gerard assured Tony of a future together, including marriage. However, after nearly 4 years, Gerard had still not initiated divorce proceedings when Allison discovered the affair in October 2011. Gerard informed Tony that they had to end their relationship. He terminated the affair, dismissed Tony from his real estate business, and reconciled with his wife without Tony, who held on to the hope of a future together. 4 months later, Tony and Gerard were conversing over the phone while she drove home. They talked about an upcoming real estate conference scheduled for the next day. Unexpectedly, Gerard mentioned that Tony would encounter Allison there. Upset by this foreseen development, Tony questioned Gerard's delay in telling her and accused him of habitual dishonesty in response to her frustration and doubts about their future. Gerard apologized, reaffirmed his love, and reiterated his commitment to divorcing within 3 months. He emphasized his intention to leave Allison, mentioning her mental health struggles. The following morning, on April 20th at 7:14 a.m., a distressed Gerard contacted the police, reporting Allison's disappearance after a walk around 10 p.m. the previous night. Upon arrival at the Bowden Clay home, police observed deep curved scratches on Gerard's face, which he attributed to a shaving accident. During a further examination for photographs, police noticed small red marks on his chest, which Gerard explained as bites from a caterpillar encountered while changing an outdoor light. The house inspection revealed no overt signs of disturbance. It was orderly with the bed neatly made. Gerard was composed, getting his daughters ready for school and daycare. Police interviewed Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, who recalled falling asleep to their mother's lullabies and hadn't seen her since she turned off the light. The girls, tearful during questioning, described their parents as generally happy and good to each other. The police initiated a search in the vicinity and interviewed neighbors for any leads on Allison's whereabouts, but no one reported seeing or hearing anything out of the ordinary. The only clues discovered that day were a small blood stain in Allison's car and a strand of her hair in the trunk. A larger-scale search operation was soon underway, with rescue teams and volunteers scouring the nearby woods, wells, shafts, and dams close to the Bowden Clay residence. A mannequin was placed, dressed similarly to Allison's last known attire, to aid in the search efforts. As time progressed, the likelihood of finding Allison alive diminished. Her friends clung to hope, unwilling to consider the worst. Gerard, visibly distraught, tearfully spoke to the media, yearning for his wife's return. Concurrently, he advised his mistress, Tony, to halt their communication and keep a low profile, promising that they would eventually be together. A decade after Allison vanished, on April 30th, 2012, a boater found a decomposed body by the Colo Creek riverbank, around 8 miles from the Bowden Clay home. The next day, Gerard reached out to the insurance company to discuss claiming his wife's life insurance, valued at $800,000 Australian dollars. Shortly after, the body discovered under the bridge was confirmed as the 43-year-old Allison Bowden Clay by a medical examiner. The advanced decomposition made determining the exact cause of death challenging. Dental records confirmed Allison's identity, and she was dressed in the same outfit as when she disappeared. Forensic indications pointed to possible strangulation, leading to the classification of her death as a homicide. On May 11, 2012, St. Paul's Church hosted Allison Bowden Clay's funeral. Gerard, visibly distraught, shed tears throughout the service, consoling his daughters and extending solace to Allison's parents. The ceremony saw a large turnout, with hundreds in attendance. Concurrently, Gerard maintained discreet contact with his mistress, Tony, using public phones for communication. He apprised her of the tragic circumstances surrounding his wife's death and implored Tony to keep their clandestine relationship hidden from police inquiries. Gerard maintained his claim that Allison had gone for a walk around 10 p.m. and was gone by the time he woke up. However, contradictory evidence emerged. Detectives found that Gerard had charged his phone at 2 a.m. and was on his computer at 5 a.m., searching for information about the right to remain silent. Forensic analysis contradicted his claim of shaving cuts, suggesting the marks on his cheek resembled fingernail scratches. Additionally, no blood was detected on his razor. A biologist challenged Gerard's explanation of caterpillar bites on his chest, noting the absence of such caterpillars in the family's area that could have caused such marks. A botanical specialist concluded that the marks were not consistent with caterpillar bites. When Allison's body was discovered, her hair contained 5 distinct leaf types: eucalyptus, Chinese elm, crepe myrtle, cat's claw vine, and fishbone fern. Notably, 2 of these varieties, eucalyptus and Chinese elm, grew directly under the bridge where her body was found. Significantly, all 5 types of leaves and thorns were present in the backyard of the Bowden Clay family residence a month after Allison's funeral on June 13, 2012. 41-year-old Gerard Baden Clay was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. Asserting his innocence, he vowed to fight the charges and sought bail, which was promptly denied due to concerns he might flee during questioning. Investigators contacted Tony, who disclosed the truth about their 4-year clandestine relationship. Notably, just days before Allison's disappearance, Gerard had sent Tony a letter promising that he would be with her by July 1st. The prosecution alleged that Gerard Baden Clay murdered Allison to claim an insurance payout, clear his debts, and start anew with Tony McHugh. They theorized that on the night of April 19, 2012, after putting their daughters to bed, Allison joined Gerard to watch TV. An intense argument is believed to have erupted, during which Allison scratched Gerard's cheek. DNA traces were found under Allison's nails, but their origin was undetermined due to degradation. The prosecution suggested that Gerard strangled Allison, dragged her body through the backyard, entangling her hair with leaves, then transported her in her car's trunk to the river, disposing of her body under a bridge. They believed Gerard expected the river to wash the body away, concealing his crime. He reportedly returned home, charged his phone, cleaned the house, and reported Allison missing the next morning. After the discovery of the body, he sought legal counsel for criminal defense and visited the lawyer's office. At the June 2014 murder trial of Allison Baden Clay, the prosecution adamantly argued for Gerard's guilt. Gerard, however, steadfastly denied any involvement. In court, he admitted to a dispute with Allison, suggesting she might have left home late at night and, in her depressive state, possibly chosen to end her life. This theory was staunchly rejected by Allison's family and friends, who were convinced of her unwavering commitment to her daughters, believing she would never abandon them. Her friends voiced long-standing disapproval of Gerard, describing him as arrogant, disingenuous, and conceited, and believed Allison's deep love for him blinded her to these negative traits. At the trial, excerpts from Allison Baden Clay's diary were presented, revealing her sense of isolation and control by Gerard, especially after their first child's birth. She felt lonely, confined to the home, and detailed Gerard's controlling behavior, including insulting her, tracking her conversations through a baby monitor, managing her finances, erasing relatives' contacts from her phone, and blocking their calls. Following Allison's demise, Gerard's attempt to claim the insurance payout was rejected, with the funds being withheld pending the trial's conclusion. Another key testimony came from Melissa Romano, who had never met Gerard in person, but spoke with him on the phone in 2009 regarding a real estate deal. She testified that after finalizing the deal, Gerard made a startling call to her, proposing, "I'm looking for someone to kill my wife." Romano, taken aback, questioned his motive, but Gerard abruptly shifted the conversation and ended the call, leaving the statement unresolved. Gerard Baden Clay was convicted on July 15, 2014, and sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 15 years. In 2015, he challenged his sentence, leading to a court ruling that the murder was unintentional and thus reducing his prison term. This verdict, however, triggered a massive public outcry, culminating in protests with about 4,000 participants standing in solidarity with Allison's family. Responding to the public sentiment, in 2016, the High Court of Australia overturned the appellate court's decision, reinstating the original murder conviction. Consequently, Gerard Baden Clay's parole eligibility has been deferred until at least 2027, while incarcerated. Initially, Gerard conducted himself as an exemplary inmate, but as time progressed, he adapted to prison life and became less restrained in his behavior, leading to an incident where he inappropriately touched a prison guard, resulting in a stern reprimand during his imprisonment. Gerard Baden Clay also established a friendship with a 73-year-old businessman and millionaire, John Chardin, who was imprisoned for the manslaughter of his wife. Additionally, he developed a rapport with Mayan Carouse, a convict serving time for the triple homicide of his girlfriend and her 2 siblings. Following the trial of Gerard Baden Clay, his former mistress, Toni McHugh, moved to Bali, where she engaged in teaching and charity work. 4 years later, she relocated to the United Arab Emirates to continue her career in education. McHugh now leads a modest lifestyle and keeps her personal details under wraps. She occasionally connects with friends via social media using an anonymous account, cautious of Baden Clay potentially locating her post-release. In her most recent media interaction, McHugh expressed remorse about the situation and clarified that she never intended harm to Allison. She also disclosed that Baden Clay and Clay had been unfaithful to Allison with not only her but other women as well, including Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, the daughters of Gerard and Allison Baden Clay. The children, Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, are being cared for by their maternal grandparents, Allison's parents. The entirety of Allison's estate, including any insurance money, was entrusted to her children in 2022. The eldest daughter, Hannah Baden Clay, has completed her university education and has pursued a career in dancing, following in her mother's footsteps to honor Allison's memory. To address the critical issue of domestic violence, Allison's sister, Vanessa, founded a charitable organization dedicated to combating domestic abuse, raising awareness, and providing support to those impacted by such situations. Through this case, being able to recognize the signs of domestic and family violence is a crucial first step towards prevention. In Allison's case, there were numerous indicators, some more conspicuous than others. These signs included, but were not limited to, a sense of isolation from friends, family, and support systems, a significant degree of control over financial resources, and a gradual erosion of self-confidence and self-worth. Identifying these things early on is essential in order to address the underlying issues and provide the necessary support and resources to those affected by domestic and family violence. By being vigilant and attuned to the subtle and overt manifestations of this complex issue, we can take proactive measures to foster safer and more supportive environments for individuals and families. Mindy Morgenstern, 22, was a senior at Valley City State University, but lived in an off-campus apartment. On September 13, 2006, her friend Toni Bauman went to her place after Mindy had not answered the phone all day. Toni knocked on the door, but no one answered. The door was unlocked, so she decided to go inside. She wasn't ready for what she had to face. Mindy was born on April 29, 1984 in Bogota, Colombia. She and her sister became adoptive children of Eunice and Larry Morgenstern, farmers from New Salem, North Dakota, USA. Larry and Eunice already had one daughter, Rebecca, but they always dreamed of a big family. First, they adopted a boy named Michael, and then 10 years later, they adopted a girl from Colombia named April. When Larry and Eunice discovered that April had a younger sister, Mindy, they adopted her too. Thus, Eunice and Larry had 4 children, 3 of whom were adopted. Mindy was their youngest child. Life on the farm was perfect for her. She loved to ride horses and play basketball. She helped her parents on the farm and even drove a tractor herself. After graduating high school, Mindy moved from New Salem to Valley City and immersed herself in student life. Being an outgoing and cheerful person, she quickly made many new friends. Mindy combined her studies and working as a waitress at a local restaurant. It seemed like the best years of her life were ahead of her, but all her plans and dreams got ruined. It was rather unusual for Mindy Morgenstern not to answer her cell phone or call her friends back. But that's what precisely happened on September 13, 2006. That's why her friends Toni Bauman and Danielle Holmstrom decided to check on her and went to her apartment. When they stopped on the other side of the street from her apartment, they saw Mindy's car in the parking lot. Danielle stayed in the car, and Toni went to Mindy's apartment on the 2nd floor. She knocked on the door, but no one answered. The door was unlocked, so Toni decided to go inside and look around. It was dark. After taking a few steps, Toni saw something lying on the floor. When she turned on the light, she realized it was the dead body of Mindy. She had noticeable injuries on her neck. Toni was shocked. She ran outside and called Danielle, who was sitting in the car. The two of them entered the apartment. They were confused. There were knife wounds on Mindy's neck and an empty bottle of cleaning agent next to her. Its smell was all over Mindy's apartment. Danielle called 911 and reported the discovery of her friend's body. Hearing the noise, a man who lived on the same floor decided to check what was happening there. He walked up to Mindy, put his hand on her wrist, and after a few seconds said, "I'm sorry, but your friend is dead." Soon after, the police arrived at the scene. Upon entering Mindy's apartment, the detectives immediately noticed the pungent smell of the cleaning agent. Mindy's body was lying across the living room. She had a belt wrapped around her neck and a broken knife sticking out of it. Its handle was lying next to her. Detectives concluded that the person who did this used a cleaning agent to try to destroy evidence, but fortunately, some evidence remained. Forensic experts found skin particles under the nails of Mindy's left hand. Mindy resisted and scratched the person who attacked her. Trying to determine what was the motive for the attack on Mindy, investigators immediately ruled out the version of a robbery that had gone bad. She had her purse in her right hand. Next to it was her phone and wallet with some cash, but whoever did it didn't take the money. Mindy's jewelry and other items that could be of interest to a robber remained untouched too. There was also a basket of clean laundry next to the body, and it looked as if someone had attacked Mindy the moment she entered the apartment with the laundry. There were no signs of forced entry on the front door. It could mean that the person who attacked Mindy either knew her or entered the apartment right after her. The next day, the detectives had to do the most complicated part of their job: informed the Morgenstern family that Mindy was dead. The news was heartbreaking for her parents, brother, and sisters. The family members didn't know anyone who might want to harm Mindy. She was friendly with everyone. Moreover, no one among her friends had problems with the law. Mindy's friends, Tony Bauman and Danielle Holmstrom, told investigators they were not the only ones in the apartment. A man who lived on the same floor came to Mindy's apartment to the sound of their screams. He checked Mindy's pulse and said she was dead. When investigators talked to the man, he said he checked her pulse with the back of his hand so as not to leave his fingerprints on Mindy's wrist. It seemed strange to the investigators. This man's name was Robert Linz. He had several scratches on his hands, which made him a suspect in this case. The police took him to the station to ask some questions, and the number of those questions increased when they checked Robert Linz's background and found that he had problems with the law. They asked him about the scratches on his hands, and he said he had injured himself at work. According to him, he often had scratches on his hands because he worked with steel. When asked how he spent the previous day, he replied that he had been at work since 7 a.m. and returned home at about 5:30 p.m. The investigators contacted his employer, and the latter confirmed it. He also confirmed that his employees often had scratches on their hands due to the job specifics. Although his alibi checked out, investigators were not ready to exclude Robert Linz from the list of suspects. They asked him to provide a DNA sample, and he agreed. The police sent the sample to the lab for comparison with the one found under Mindy's fingernails. The police interviewed all of Mindy's friends, but it didn't bring any results. Everyone said that Mindy had no conflicts with anyone. While waiting for the DNA results, the investigators interviewed her other neighbors. One of those who lived in the same building as Mindy was a corrections officer from the Barnes County Jail, Mo Gibbs. Gibbs knew the investigators involved in the case. They decided to talk to him, hoping he had seen or heard something. After all, being a corrections officer, he probably paid attention to things that other people didn't notice or considered unimportant. Mo married a girl with a child, and they all lived in the apartment next door. He came to the police station with a child. Therefore, one of the officers kept the child busy so that Mo could answer all questions without interference. The investigators said they wanted to talk with everyone who lived in the same building as Mindy. Mo Gibbs said that he served in the Navy from 1990 to 1999, but then he was fired for assault and served a prison sentence. However, he had no more law problems after becoming a free man again. Before becoming a corrections officer, he worked as a college guard. He allegedly had a night shift the day before Mindy died. In the morning, he returned home and started loading boxes into the car because he, his wife, and his stepdaughter were moving to another apartment. Mo said he didn't see or hear anything unusual. However, there was one thing that caught his attention, and it was the strong smell of the cleaning agent. But he didn't bother to check where the smell came from because he was busy moving. Mo had scratches on his hands. He said he had injured himself while carrying the boxes. When the police asked Mo if he had ever been to Mimby Morgenstern's apartment, the man stated that he had been there once when he helped Mimby carry a laundry basket to her apartment. Investigators asked Mo Gibbs to provide a sample of his DNA for comparison, and he agreed without much hesitation. They let him go after taking his DNA sample. Investigators wanted to talk to everyone who knew Mindy well. They went to the restaurant where she worked and interviewed her colleagues. They found out that there was a visitor who made Mindy nervous. He lived in a trailer near the restaurant and went there almost daily. He was acting strangely, and Mindy said she felt uncomfortable around him. This man's name was Ralph, and the police decided to question him. He denied any connection to Mindy's death, saying he didn't know who she was at all. According to him, he never quarreled with anyone in that restaurant. Ralph did not have a reliable alibi, but he provided a sample of his DNA, which the police also sent to the laboratory for comparative analysis. Next, the investigators decided to chat with Mindy's boyfriend, Jordan Raynham. He, like Mindy, came from a local farming family, and their relationship lasted more than a year. They went to the same church, and that's where they met. Jordan had no problems with the law and had a good reputation in the city. Jordan seemed devoted to Mindy. He often took her home to spend time with his family. However, Mindy's parents told investigators that sometimes Jordan came to their farm unannounced and asked Mindy to come with him. It seemed like he was jealous. Yet Eunice and Larry did not believe that he could harm their daughter. The police asked Jordan to come to the station. The latter showed up there without delay. He was trying to help the investigators and answered the questions frankly. He said he saw Mindy the day before her death. They went shopping and were at a video rental shop. The next day, Mindy called him at 10:45 a.m. That was the day she died. They only talked once that day. And that was unusual for Mindy. She usually called Jordan 10 times a day, but this time she neither called nor answered. He thought she was busy and would call him back later, but she didn't. Jordan also told the police about his whereabouts at the time of Mindy's death. He allegedly worked on the family farm at that time. Investigators asked Jordan to provide a DNA sample and take a polygraph test. He agreed. During the polygraph test, Jordan was worried and his results were inconclusive. The police let Jordan go, sent his DNA sample to the lab, and started checking his alibi. But Jordan wasn't the only significant person in Mindy's life. Another potential suspect was Kyle Kuznia, Mindy's ex-boyfriend. They broke up more than a year before Mindy's death. However, there was something strange that happened after their breakup. Kyle Kuznia was the love of her life. They connected right away. Kyle met Mindy when she was a freshman. They had been dating for 2.5 years, and Kyle often visited the farm of Mindy's parents. Her family loved him and treated him like their son. Mindy loved him very much. She thought she would marry him one day, but unfortunately for Mindy, there was no wedding. Kyle told investigators the story of his life with Mindy. He told how they met and that they immediately felt attracted to each other. The relationship lasted 2.5 years, and Kyle described it as ups and downs. They started to quarrel often. Kyle finished his studies at the university and needed to move on. He moved to another place, about an hour's drive from Valley City. Mindy was worried Kyle would find another girl. Being in a long-distance relationship is a challenge. Therefore, according to Kyle, he decided to end it. They broke up, but Mindy tried to do everything she could to be with him. She wanted him back. Kyle told investigators he had met another girl and stopped communicating with Mindy after they broke up. But there was one night when Mindy came to his house to talk. It was about 7 months before she died. Allegedly, Kyle told her to leave. He had nothing to say to her. Mindy got upset and left, and they haven't spoken to each other since. But sitting in the interrogation room a few days after her death, Kyle seemed to regret his behavior. He told them that Mimby had been in touch with his father, Rodney Kuznia, and it was very, very strange. Mimby's friends said Kyle's father called her several times a day. Sometimes it was just a few calls a week. Kyle stated that in his opinion, his father was attached to Mindy too much. At some point, he even asked his father to stop communicating with his ex-girlfriend. Kyle then mentioned that his mother found out about all these calls and was very upset. She told Rodney that it was wrong. After all, he was married. The Kuznia family genuinely liked Mindy. For her, communicating with Rodney was probably a way to keep some connection with Kyle. The police checked Mindy's voicemail and found something strange there. There was a voicemail message from Rodney Kuznia left after Mindy's death, in which he cried and said he was sorry this happened. The police found such a close relationship between Rodney and Mindy strange. Thus, they called him in for questioning. The first question they asked Rodney was the most obvious one. Why was he so attached to his son's 22-year-old ex-girlfriend? Rodney agreed that it was rather strange. According to him, he became attached to Mindy when she was dating Kyle. Rodney liked her, and she reminded him of his wife when she was young. At first, he and Mindy used to talk about Kyle. She always mentioned his son's name, but soon they started talking and texting on other topics. They didn't stop even after his wife found out about it. Rodney said he and Mindy sometimes talked 20 times a week. He claimed that most of the time, Mindy called him herself. Rodney said Mindy was like a daughter to him. When he heard the terrible news about what had happened to her, he was shocked. He just wanted to talk to Mindy one last time, so he left a message on her voicemail. For investigators, these emotional voicemails didn't make Rodney any less suspicious. It was probably the other way around. Although investigators did not believe that Mindy had a romantic relationship with her ex-boyfriend's father, it was possible that he became dangerously obsessed with her. Rodney provided the police with his DNA. They asked him again and again about his whereabouts that day. He said he worked on the farm with his two sons from 7:30 a.m. until evening. Rodney's family confirmed his alibi, and investigators released him. They sent the sample of his DNA to the lab for comparison with the skin particles found under Mindy's fingernails. While the police were searching for the person responsible for Mindy's death, the residents of Valley City started to worry about their safety. Many were afraid to go outside, knowing that the one who took Mindy's life was still at large. Mindy's funeral was 6 days after her death. The coffin was placed in the school's gym, as the church would not accommodate everyone who wanted to say goodbye to her. The police, dressed in civilian clothes, also attended the funeral ceremony. They were supposed to keep an eye on everyone because they thought the person who took Mindy's life would also be there. The police instructed people to take photos and videos of everyone to see if anyone would behave strangely at the funeral, but this tactic did not bring results. The police had run out of suspects, and therefore, all that was left to do was wait for the results of the DNA tests of all the suspects. However, they discovered some interesting information even before the DNA results. It happened after the experts analyzed the DNA found under Mindy's fingernails and entered it into the federal database. 2 years before Mindy's death, someone attacked a woman in Fargo, North Dakota, 75 miles from Valley City. The person who attacked her forced her to make contact with him. I'm going to call what happened by that word, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. So, the police had a DNA sample of the suspect, but this case remained unsolved. At that time, there was no information about this person in the database. Now, it turned out that the one who took Mindy's life and the one who attacked the woman in Fargo were the same person. It meant that this person was not going to stop. The police needed to find him before someone else got hurt by his actions. They didn't have the person's name, but the Fargo case could push forward the investigation of Mindy's death and provide new leads. The police investigating the case of Mindy Morgenstern met with a woman from Fargo to try to find out from her any details about the man who attacked her. She was only 22 years old at the time, and she planned to become a teacher. One evening, she was hanging out with friends. They went to a bar, talked, had fun, and drank alcohol. She told her friends she wanted to go to the bathroom. That was the last thing she remembered. When she regained consciousness, she found herself pinned to a mattress in an unfamiliar apartment. She was lying on her stomach, and a man she had never seen before was on top of her. He put his hand over her mouth so she couldn't scream. She tried to resist, but the man was twice her size. She thought it was the end of her, but this man let her go. She was barefoot, her clothes were messy, and her purse was missing. She went to the police and described the man who attacked her as a muscular African American, over 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. They couldn't track this man down, but they had a sample of his DNA. The Fargo police entered this DNA into the federal database and waited. But 2 years have passed, and this case remained unsolved. But now it was evident that this man had committed a new attack, but this time with a fatal ending. Investigating the case of Mindy Morgenstern, the police collected several DNA samples. The lab has been working overtime to process these samples. After conducting a thorough analysis, the experts contacted the investigators and reported they found a match. The one who took Mindy's life was one of the men who provided their sample voluntarily. It wasn't Mindy's ex-boyfriend Kyle or his father Rodney who aroused a lot of suspicion. The skin found under Mindy Morgenstern's fingernails belonged to 34-year-old Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer at the Barnes County Jail. Mo has come a long way from his early life as a member of the Crips gang in Central California to serving in the U.S. Navy. He was married and had children. He lived in Fargo, but after the divorce, he moved to Valley City and worked as a college guard before getting a job at Barnes County Jail. Since he worked in law enforcement, he was familiar with the investigators involved in Mindy's case. He seemed like a good guy. Therefore, everyone was surprised that the DNA sample under Mindy's fingernails belonged to Mo Gibbs. The investigators decided to lure Gibbs to the police station. They called him and said they wanted to ask him some additional questions. He was under covert surveillance in case he decided to run away. But he showed up at the police station at the appointed time. Before informing him that they found his DNA under Mindy's fingernails, the police offered Gibbs to take a polygraph test. He agreed and answered all the questions, but there were some signs of lying on his part. Gibbs stated he had nothing to do with Mindy's death. After learning about the DNA match, he remained calm and claimed he wasn't the one who took Mindy's life. When the police told him that his DNA linked him to the Fargo case, he grinned but said nothing. The evidence obtained was enough to arrest him. Mo Gibbs was handcuffed and formally charged with taking the life of Mindy Morgenstern. They then subsequently charged him in the Fargo case. After news about his arrest went public, 5 female prisoners reported that Mo Gibbs had forced them into intimacy for several months. It all happened when Gibbs was on duty. Thus, the police charged him with 6 more counts. It seems rather strange that a man who served a prison sentence was first hired as a college guard and then as a corrections officer at the Barnes County Jail. But there's an explanation for this. None of Mo Gibbs's employers suspected that this was not his birth-given name. He changed his name at some point. Before becoming Mo Gibbs, he was Glenn Dale Morgan Jr. When he was in the Navy, he was involved in a drive-by shooting and spent more than 5 years in prison. During the trial, Gibbs's lawyers came up with the theory that his DNA ended up under Mindy's fingernails because she touched the same door handle as Mo. According to the defense, Mindy's boyfriend, Jordan Raynham, was the one who could have harmed Mindy. Gibbs pleaded guilty to all charges except those related to Mindy's death. Neither his fingerprints nor DNA were on the knife that injured Mindy. But prosecutors explained this by saying the cleaning agent had destroyed all traces. The prosecution believed that Gibbs entered Mindy's apartment right after her to force her into intimacy. She started to resist, and he lost his temper and took her life. To destroy the evidence, he doused everything with the cleaning agent. Gibbs stated that he would not have voluntarily provided his DNA sample if he had been the one who took Mindy's life. On July 12, 2007, the jury failed to reach a unanimous decision. Therefore, There was a new trial that took place 4 months later. This time, the prosecutors have prepared better. They involved several DNA experts to refute the lawyer's claim that Gibbs's DNA ended up under Mindy's fingernails because she touched the same door handle as him. At the trial, experts testified that such an amount of DNA could have gotten under Mindy's nails only during a vigorous physical contact. Gibbs's cellmate also testified at the trial. He said that Mo confessed to him that he had taken Mindy's life. Moreover, he said he would do it again if he had the opportunity. After 27 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mo Gibbs guilty on November 20th, 2007. When asked whether he had anything to say before sentencing, Gibbs, 35, maintained his innocence and told Judge John Paulson, my prayers go out to the Morgenstern family. This is terrible, and it never should have happened, and I apologize that it happened. The judge, however, said the evidence was overwhelming that Gibbs had strangled and stabbed Mindy in the neck and then poured Pine Sol cleaning fluid on her face and torso. He denied Gibbs's request for a new trial. The court sentenced him to life in prison without parole for taking the life of Mindy, plus 12 years for assaulting a woman in Fargo, and another 15 years on other charges. Mindy Morgenstern's mother, Eunice, said a few words to Gibbs after the sentencing. She looked at Gibbs and said, "Mr. Gibbs, I forgive you publicly here. I also want you to know that I won't forget what you did to Mindy." She ended her comments by telling Gibbs, "My heart goes out to his family and children." Gibbs said, "Thank you." Gibbs remains incarcerated at the North Dakota State Penitentiary in Bismarck. In June of 1995, it seemed like life couldn't possibly get any better for Mark and Donna Winger. The nuclear technician and his wife had been happily married for several years, and they had just adopted a newborn baby girl named Bailey. Donna was the oldest of 3 sisters in what they described as an incredibly close-knit family. The Dreschers grew to love Mark too. He was smart, Jewish. He was attractive and he was fun, Donna's sister, Jenny Levin, told the media. Donna just felt like she had found her person. After Mark and Donna Winger were married in 1989, he was offered a job, and the newlyweds settled in Springfield, Illinois. "We always joked about the fact when one sister marries, that husband marries 3 sisters," Levin said. "We shared our lives with Mark." Donna was working as an operating room technician and Mark was a nuclear engineer. Donna couldn't have been happier. The only thing she would have liked to was to have a child, her stepfather, Ira Drescher, said. Donna's mother, Sarah Jane Drescher, said her daughter was overwhelmed when she learned that she could not get pregnant. But then one day while working at the hospital, a doctor told Donna that a teenager was looking to put her baby up for adoption. Adopting the child was an easy decision for her. "She looked at me with tears when she said, 'Michelle, I knew it the minute they put the baby into my arms. She has always been mine,' Donna's sister Michelle Hansen said. The Wingers welcomed baby Bailey into their home on June 1st, 1995. Donna's family said the couple loved their new roles as parents. They seemed to have all the makings of a long and happy life together. Mark was just as excited to become a dad as Donna was to become a mom, Hansen said. Donna had met the woman who would eventually become her best friend, Deanne Schultz, at the hospital. And with the arrival of Bailey, the two bonded over motherhood. But then everything turned dark. In August 1995, Donna took baby Bailey on a trip to Hollywood, Florida, to visit Donna's family. Her mother had just dropped the 2 of them off at the airport and hired a driver to pick them up in St. Louis, Missouri, and drive them back to Springfield. So after the visit, the 2 flew into St. Louis Airport and hopped in a cab driven by Roger Harrington for the 2-hour ride back to Springfield. During the course of the drive, Harrington reportedly began flirting with Donna and talking about drugs and orgies. Detective Charlie Cox, a police officer who investigated Donna's death, later said, "This gentleman started opening up to Donna about issues he was having. He had a voice in his head named Dom. Dom would tell him to do bad things. Recently, Dom was telling him to hurt people." After Donna safely arrived home with Bailey, she called the transit company to make a formal complaint about Harrington's behavior, and the driver was suspended. Cox later said that the driver started flirting with Donna, telling her he liked older women and even invited her to attend what he described as one of his sex parties. Donna had told her family that the ride was terrifying because he was driving erratically at 75 miles per hour. After the harrowing ride, Donna had been the victim of some strange phone calls, Weinhoff said. The family had believed that the driver had been stalking her and was a danger. Donna called the limousine company to file a complaint, and Harrington was suspended. Mark argued his wife to write down the story in case they might need it. Police later found the note describing Donna's harrowing ride in her handwriting at the crime scene. Donna also told Mark about the experience, and though he played a part of the supportive husband and helped her file the complaint, it turned out that he had ulterior motives for doing so. Just days later, Mark invited Harrington to their home, perhaps under the pretense of helping him get his job back. On the 29th of August 1995, the cab driver wrote Mark's name, address, and the time on a scrap of paper in his car, drove to the Winger's home, walked inside with a coffee cup and a pack of cigarettes, and was shot twice in the head. Mark Winger then called 911 and told the dispatcher he'd just shot a man who was killing his wife. He informed police that he'd been walking on the treadmill in the basement when he heard a commotion upstairs. He grabbed his gun, went to investigate, and found Harrington swinging a hammer at Donna. In an effort to defend his wife, he'd shot the man twice. Police arrived on the scene to find that both Donna and Harrington still had a weak pulse. Mark was in a back bedroom, rolling back and forth in total shock. When former Springfield Police Detective Charlie Cox arrived at the Wingers' home, he remembered they could see the victims from the front door. Donna was clinging to life, said Sangamon County Assistant State Attorney Steve Weinholt. She had been hit no less than 7 times in the head with a hammer. The second victim, a white man, had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, but still had a pulse when police arrived, said Weinholt. It was quite chaotic, Cox said. I knew that they were probably going to be transporting the victim soon, so I wanted to try and get identification on the male suspect. Cox found the man's wallet and was able to identify him as Roger Harrington. Police recovered a bloody hammer near the 2 bodies and found Mark's .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, a yellow mug, and a pack of cigarettes on the same dining table. They also noticed that Harrington's car had been parked against traffic, facing the wrong direction. At the crime scene, Cox said Mark was very upset and very emotional, and that he repeatedly asked who the man he'd killed was. Cox avoided identifying Harrington and tried to calm Mark down. As police combed through the scene, Mark asked police if the intruder's name was Roger. Cox confirmed that it was. Mark was shocked and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's the man who's been harassing my wife this week," Cox said. Cox, who was familiar with Harrington after he'd lived in a trailer park owned by Cox, believed Harrington might have snapped. "I knew him as a very volatile type subject. He and his wife rented a trailer for me," Cox said. "Knowing what I knew about Mr. Harrington in the past, how quick he was to anger, I thought that very well he could have gone over there to try to get his job back. There's a hammer laying right there on the table. He picks it up and goes into a rage, then the husband shoots the bad guy." Tragically, both victims succumbed to their injuries. After learning about Donna's previous run-in with Harrington and listening to Mark's version of events, the police closed the case within days, listing Roger Harrington as the culprit. Because once police examined the scene and listened to Mark's story, detectives concluded that he had acted in self-defense. The case was closed in about 48 hours, Weinholt said. But Harrington's family insisted from the beginning that their son was harmless. "He was no troublemaker. He was a good kid. He wouldn't even strike at anybody," his mother, Helen Harrington, said. "I don't think he would hurt anybody, and I don't think he was crazy." So it seemed like Mark Winger was going to get away with murder. Donna's mother spoke to the media about the evening, and the family received the news of her daughter's murder. "It was 4 in the morning, and I said, 'Jenny, it's Mom. Something terrible has happened,' Sarah Jane Drescher said of her call to Levin. "We sat there in my room, just crying at this unimaginable loss," Levin said. In the following months, Donna's mother and sister took turns traveling to Illinois to help take care of Bailey. "I loved Mark because he loved Donna, and that's what was important to me," Sarah Jane Drescher said. "But I had to be very careful because I did not want to ruin my relationship with him, because I did not want to ruin my relationship with the baby. I wanted to be a grandma, and Bailey made me a grandma." Mark was now a single father raising his infant daughter on his own. Donna's family initially flew to Illinois to help out, but they couldn't stay. and they suggested Mark hire a nanny. In January 1996, he met 23-year-old Rebecca Simic, who was searching for a nanny job in the area. Rebecca told reporters, "It just felt like Bailey was the one that really needed me the most. She had been through so much already at the age of 3 months." Rebecca was wonderful with Bailey, and even Donna's family agreed that she was like an angel sent to help Mark. While she felt a little uncomfortable in the house, where 2 people had died violently, she was dedicated to giving Bailey a good childhood despite the trauma of losing her mother. "I didn't want to like Rebecca, but it was hard not to like her," Levin said. "Seeing her with Bailey, there was really nothing bad we could say about her." Meanwhile, Rebecca's role at Mark's home had begun to evolve. When you live with someone and you're taking care of a child together, it's very easy to kind of play house. Rebecca said later on. Rebecca told the media that she was blown away by what the infant had been through in such a short time. "Mark made me feel like I was like an angel sent to him from God or Donna, and it was my purpose to make this family whole again," Rebecca said. She lost 2 mothers by the time she was 3 months old, and she was so smiley, Rebecca said. "I wanted to get in there and say, I'm going to help and I'm going to make this little girl's life better." Mark helped Rebecca feel at ease in her new role. After a few months, the two found themselves sharing conversation and a glass of wine at the end of a long day. And then one thing led to another as their relationship turned intimate. Within the year, Rebecca was pregnant with Mark's child. The couple eloped in Hawaii in October 1996, just 14 months after Donna's death. "I remember asking him how he could move on so quickly," Rebecca later recalled. "And he explained to me that when you have a good marriage, it's natural for you to just want that again." Rebecca said Mark had told her he wasn't able to have children, so she said she was very surprised when she found out she was pregnant with his child only months after moving in. "Obviously, I wasn't careful. It was just kind of a shock," she said. Mark, on the other hand, was thrilled, Rebecca recalled. "It felt like it was a victory to him," she said. "Mark put pressure on me to marry him and have children with him." Rebecca said that Mark, who was Jewish when they met, even started going to church with her. She said he told her they could raise a family in a Christian home. "I would be honored to be your husband and blessed if you were my wife," Mark wrote in a letter to Rebecca. Mark's rabbi, Michael Datz, asked him about his change in faith, and he said that Mark explained, "Judaism is just too difficult and unforgiving." Rabbi Datz didn't understand, asking, "Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you need forgiveness for?" He said Mark didn't respond. But then it seemed like Mark was trying almost a little too hard to leave the past behind. 16 months after his wife's death, Mark told Sarah Jane Drescher that he was going to sell the house where her daughter Donna had died and buy another one just outside of town. He and Rebecca had started a family of their own, and he started cutting ties with Donna's parents. "I received a letter from Mark one day saying to me I could not be called Grandma," Sarah Jane Drescher said. "I wrote him back and I begged him, please let her call me Grandma. And he said, I'm sorry, there's no way I am going to allow her to call you Grandma, and that's the way it is." Sarah said she mourned that loss for a long time. Bailey Simic, now 25, told reporters that her grandmother and grandfather, Ira Drescher, would send a birthday card to her every year. "I always remember asking my mom, 'Who's Sarah Jane and Ira?' she said. My mom would always explain, like, 'Those are Donna's parents, and they just want to let you know that, like, they love you and that they remember you.'" Eventually, Mark sold the house where Donna had died and moved with his new wife to the suburbs outside of Springfield. Things seemed great on the surface. They had 3 children together, and Rebecca raised Bailey as her daughter. Though chaotic, their life seemed almost perfect. Mark was a loving partner and a very involved father. That would all change quite soon. One day in early 1909, when Mark was feeling ill, Rebecca took him to the emergency room in the hospital where Donna had worked before her death. There they saw Donna's best friend and co-worker, Deanne Schultz. She seemed upset to see Mark, and Rebecca remembered that Deanne had acted strangely when she first came on Bailey's nanny, as if she were anxious to stay involved in Bailey's life. After they returned home, Mark commented that that may not be the last they heard from Deanne. He was right. In February 1999, Deanne dropped a bombshell on the police, revealing that she and Mark had been having an affair before Donna's death. She said that, at one point, he'd remarked to her that things would be easier for them if Donna was dead. She told them that after Donna's fateful ride with Roger Harrington, Mark said that he needed to get that driver to the house. "All you'd need to do is find the body," he told her. Deanne never thought Mark was serious, but when Donna turned up dead soon after, she knew he had done it. Mark had threatened her not to tell anyone about the things he'd said, and she'd attempted suicide several times while struggling with her guilt. After seeing him in the hospital, she decided she couldn't keep quiet any longer. After hearing Deanne's story, police decided to take a closer look at the evidence from the day of the murders. The more they thought about what they'd once assumed was an open and shut case, the more questions they had. Why were there no signs of forced entry into the Winger home that August day? Why would Roger Harrington bring his cup of coffee and cigarettes into the house with him if he'd planned to attack Donna? And why would he use the Winger's hammer as a weapon when he had a tire iron and a knife in his car? At that point, investigators came upon 3 never-before-seen Polaroid photos taken the day of the murders. They'd been with the evidence collected in a civil suit Mark had filed against the transportation company that had employed Harrington. The position of the bodies in the photos showed that Mark's version of events were not possible. Mark Winger had stated that Roger Harrington was kneeling right next to Donna Winger's head and he was beating her with a hammer, Weinhoft explained. He stated that he shot him and that the man fell backward so that his feet remained near Donna's head. In reality, the Polaroid photographs show the exact opposite. Blood spatter experts agreed. Cox later told the media, "I was ashamed of the way the investigation went. I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim." It had become clear that Mark was the real murderer behind the scenes the whole time. Rebecca Simic was left to make sense of the tragedy. She had no idea what Mark was capable of, and afterward, she moved her 4 children out of Springfield to feel safer. While Mark had tried to keep Bailey away from Donna's family, Rebecca encouraged them to be reunited. "We'd been hurt a lot by the same person," Rebecca said, "but it didn't break us." Donna's family and Rebecca spoke to reporters about the horrific realization that Mark was a manipulative killer hiding behind the mask of a brilliant engineer and a kind, loving husband and father. In December 1999, more than 4 years after the murders, the Springfield State Journal-Register ran an article based on allegations in the civil lawsuit that Mark had arranged the murder himself and killed both his wife and Harrington. The allegations were based on a blood spatter expert hired by Bark Transportation in the case after the arrest of their employee Harrington. "Everything came to a head. It changed everything," Rebecca said of the article. "I mean, it went from Mark as the hero who was defending his wife, this noble stand-up guy that every man wanted to pat on the back, to a manipulative, deviant murderer." As the detectives continued their reinvestigation, they learned that Harrington's roommate, Susan Collins, had initially told police that someone asked to meet with Harrington on the day of the murders, and that she had seen Harrington on the phone arranging that meeting. Inside Harrington's car, they found a note written on a bank deposit slip with Mark's name, his address, and the time to be there. Roger Harrington was not an intruder, but rather he was lured into that home by Mark Winger, Weinhoft said. Deanne Schulte's cooperation with police and evidence that raised questions about Mark's story prompted the voluntary dismissal of the civil suit against Bark Transportation. "I didn't see it coming," Rebecca said. "I didn't know that this whole investigation was brewing. I never thought the whole time that they thought my husband was a diabolical murderer." A warrant was issued for Mark's arrest, and he was taken into custody while at work. "I had made plans to go to McDonald's Playland," Rebecca recalled. "We were there and I got a phone call, and it was Mark's secretary, and she told me that Mark had just been arrested. I was just sick. Like my whole body kind of went numb, and I just couldn't believe it. I was shaking so badly, and I just remembered feeling so scared. I felt that I owed it to him and to my kids to just stand by him," she said. Hanson, Donna's sister, said she didn't feel relieved following Mark's arrest. "I still wanted to believe he was innocent," she said. "Here's this person that I know in handcuffs, and what's going to happen?" Bailey was just 6 years old at the time of Mark's arrest. She said no longer having her father home was scary. "I just remember everyone just trying to remain calm and kind of, at the time, being like, 'Dad's just going away for a while and that he'll be back soon,'" she said. But that was no longer possible. On August 23, 2001, Mark Winger was indicted for the murders of Donna Winger and Roger Harrington. At the trial in May 2002, a visibly shaky Deanne testified against Mark. The court granted her immunity in exchange for her testimony, though there was no evidence linking her to anything other than keeping Mark's terrible secret. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. One of the key points the prosecution had to prove was that Harrington had gone to the house to meet with the Wingers, not to commit a murder. They presented the cigarettes and coffee mug that he'd brought inside, as well as the weapons he'd left in his car and the note with Mark's name and address. Mark's attorney argued that Harrington was mentally ill, that he behaved erratically, and that these traits indicated he was capable of murder. When prosecutors presented the Polaroids showing the position of the bodies before they were removed from the scene, Mark's attorney argued throughout the trial that first responders could have moved the bodies. It's our belief that Roger comes to the house, he's allowed into the home, now retired Detective Jim Graham said. There were no signs of forced entry, and he was executed at that time. Hearing the gunshot, Donna Winger then comes from the bathroom to investigate. He then beats his wife to death with a hammer. Mark then calls 911. In the 911 call, someone can be heard moaning in the background when Mark tells the operator he can hear his baby crying and hangs up. He had told the operator there was a bullet in Harrington's head, but when police arrived, Harrington had been shot twice. Deanne also gave damning testimony at the trial, saying that Mark told her it would be easier if Donna just died. I thought it was crazy talk, she said during her cross-examination. After a chance meeting years later, Deanne testified that she confronted Mark in the hopes of gathering information and asked him how he lived with himself, and that he'd replied that he had found Jesus Christ and was forgiven. She said he warned her that if she ever said anything, they would both be in trouble. I didn't think that anybody would believe her, Rebecca said. I just thought if Mark truly did that, she would have come forward right away. Mark's defense argued that Deanne was emotionally unstable and just a woman who had been scorned. Deanne Schultz's testimony was able to demonstrate that, in reality, Mark was obviously unhappy, unfaithful, and had specifically talked about wanting to kill his wife, Weinhoft said. Schultz was granted immunity for her testimony, he added. There was no direct evidence that directly linked Deanne to actively participating in this crime. In the end, she was such a valuable witness as it relates to presenting the motive. After a trial that lasted 3 weeks, the jury found Mark Winger guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Rebecca said she believed he would be going home with them. After the verdict, she said the words guilty rang through her head and that she wanted the earth to open up and swallow me. Sarah Jane Drescher and her daughters, Donna's sisters, were with her when they heard the verdict. The 3 of us just embraced and cried, she said. And the story gets even more twisted, because 4 years later, Mark was also sentenced to an additional 35 years in prison when he tried to hire a hitman to kill Deanne, or testifying against him. He even attempted to put out a hit against a childhood friend who had refused to pay his bail. Helen Harrington was relieved and grateful that her son had been vindicated of Donna's murder. We knew that Roger was innocent, and it finally got proven, she said. He was branded a murderer at the time, but then all this came to an end. The police also had to come to terms with the faulty initial investigation. I was ashamed of the way the investigation went, Cox said. I hurt Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim. The police department had too hastily closed the case and turned a blind eye to some red flags, and to right such a wrong, it felt great, Bram added. But Rebecca said there wasn't any closure for her or her family. When we lose someone, we gather. We have a funeral, Rebecca shared. But when someone goes to prison, well, what do? You're just kind of left with this emptiness and this hole that you can't really have closure with that. It wasn't just him being sentenced to life, she said. We were sentenced to a life of a father in prison. Bailey Simic says she missed having her father around while growing up. It was really hard being in school, seeing all the other kids have their dads and that relationship, she said. And now suddenly, I couldn't just go to my dad's room or have him pick us up from school or anything like that. Ben Simic was only a year old when his dad went to prison. I can look at the pictures and look at myself and say, that kid has no idea. He was way too young to know anything that was going on, he said. Rebecca had to move out of Springfield with her kids, and the home that she'd bought with Mark was foreclosed. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, so she had no option but to file for bankruptcy. I didn't have anything to give my kids. Everything had been taken away. All I had was love, she said. Rebecca never remarried as far as we know. She raised all 4 of the children on her own. And Bailey has since reunited with Donna's family. It was so incredible to see that there's this whole big family that loves me. And Sarah Jane still has my baby picture on her kitchen counter with all of her other grandkids, even though we've been gone for so long, she said. We've been hurt a lot by the same person, but it didn't break us, Rebecca said. Although Sarah Jane Drescher says there will never be closure for the murder of her daughter, the family has worked together to set up Donna's Fund, which is a part of Women in Distress, an organization that works to provide shelter for women trying to escape abuse. I think her legacy will live on through people that we help, Levin said, and through the beautiful memories that we have of her. So what do you think of this crazy, twisted case of murder uncovered? Would Mark Winger still be walking scot-free today if his former lover, Deanne Schultz, hadn't developed a guilty conscience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe for more in-depth coverage of some of the most manipulative murders of all time.